After 20 years of caring for my wife's daughter, I was abandoned by her at the wedding when she chose her biological father over me. I've been married to Sarah for more than 20 years. When we met, she was a single mother of a 5-year-old child named Emma. Emma was a bright-eyed, inquisitive little girl with a laugh that could brighten up any room. The first time I saw her, she was chasing a paper airplane in the park, clutching Sarah's hand tightly as they moved toward me. Something in that instant told me they were the future. Sarah was open about her past right from the start. Emma's biological father, Mark, had always been untrustworthy, full of hollow promises and transient appearances. He would call on birthdays, drop off cheap gifts, and then go. Emma was usually excited when Daddy arrived, despite Sarah's efforts to keep her expectations in check. When Sarah and I became serious, she made it obvious that Emma was her top priority. I totally accepted it. What I didn't expect was how much I'd come to love her. It didn't happen right away, but every "I love you, Dad," and every small sketch with my name misspelled eventually won me over. I was present when she learned to ride a bike after numerous falls and scraped knees. I was there when she developed a high temperature in the middle of the night, cuddling her while Sarah ran for a thermometer. I helped her memorize her poem for her first school recital. On the big day, she shook behind the curtain but caught my gaze in the crowd before she began, needing reassurance that I was present. I always was. Mark, on the other hand, was merely a background character. He made huge promises such as, "Next summer I'll take you to the beach," or "I'll buy you that bike you want," but never followed through. Emma used to cry when those promises broke apart, and I would pick up the pieces. I never wanted to be the reason she stopped believing in her father. As she grew older, our friendship grew stronger. I was the one who attended her school meetings, helped her choose her graduation gown, and cheered her on from the bleachers during her games. She called me Dad, and even though I wasn't her biological father, I could see she meant it. That's why what occurred next devastated me. I wholeheartedly supported Emma's decision to attend college. I paid for much of her tuition, books, and even her little apartment rent. It was a financial cost, but I did not mind. I wanted her to have the opportunities I never had. Mark, as always, was inconsistent. He would occasionally call to say, "Your dad is proud of you," but he never contributed monetarily or actively participated in her life. Emma went up to me after the graduation ceremony, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for everything, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." At that point, every sacrifice seemed worthwhile. So when Emma announced her wedding to Andrew, I was ecstatic. I imagined escorting her down the aisle, a symbolic moment that reflected everything we had gone through. I never stated it aloud, but I assumed that honor was mine. After all, I had been there for her at every milestone. The weeks leading up to the wedding were full with anticipation. Emma discussed her outfit, the flowers, and the music. As always, I offered my assistance, paying for a portion of the reception, donating to her attire, and covering additional expenses. I never anticipated anything in return, other than to be recognized as an important part of her day. Then the invitation arrived. I opened it with a smile, expecting to find my name in a particular place. Instead, it was only a formal guest list. My name wasn't really significant. Worse, Emma had selected Mark to accompany her down the aisle. At first, I assumed it was an error, but when I asked her about it, her remark hit me like a blow in the belly. "There's only one biological father, and I've always wanted to give him this moment." I can't express how it felt to have years of love, sacrifice, and effort rejected as nothing. But the worst part wasn't her choice. It was how nonchalantly she said it, as if she'd never considered choosing me. Her wedding day was one of the most embarrassing experiences of my life. I arrived early in a fitted suit, sat quietly among the guests, and watched Mark escort Emma down the aisle. During the remarks, I waited for someone to acknowledge me. Nobody did. I was invisible. Something inside of me snapped that day. The part of me that had always been willing to give up simply shut down. I didn't realize it at the time, but that moment signaled the start of a shift that would change everything. That moment, watching Emma come down the aisle on Mark's arm, was etched in my memory. She was gorgeous, as any bride should be, yet the vision left me bitter. Not because I didn't want her to be happy, but because I recognized in that moment that I was no longer her priority. Emma and Andrew embarked on a lavish honeymoon at a seaside resort with stunning views and first-rate amenities the week after their wedding. I did not ask many questions about it. I couldn't bring myself to talk about something that was the breaking point in our relationship. What I hadn't expected was what happened when Emma returned. She barely had time to unpack before contacting me. Her tone was light, as if nothing had occurred. She spoke about the beaches and the surprise meal Andrew had planned under the sky. I listened silently, answering briefly and fighting to maintain my composure. Then the talk went the way I should have expected. "Dad," she stated. The familiarity of that word wounded harder than I'd like to acknowledge. "I need a favor." They had some unexpected honeymoon expenses and were running low on cash. Could I help with the cost? For a moment, I was speechless. She asked so casually and confidently, as if she expected me to answer yes, like I had always done. I was the one who corrected things, provided, and made selfless sacrifices for her. But this time, something inside me resisted. Maybe it was wounded pride, or maybe it was the weight of years of neglect. All I know is that for the first time, I did not feel compelled to say yes. "I'm sorry, Emma," I replied, holding my voice steady while my heart hammered. "I can't help you this time." There was silence. I could image her expression of confusion. "But you've always helped before," she finally remarked, her voice filled with skepticism. I took a deep breath. "Maybe you should ask Mark. He's your real father, isn't he? Maybe he can help." There was another long pause, followed by a whispered, "I understand," before she hung up. There was no dispute or fury, only an abrupt conclusion that left an empty space in my chest. Later, Sarah confronted me. She called me heartless and claimed I couldn't simply abandon Emma when she needed me. I told her it was not about money, but about respect. I was there for her for over 20 years, Sarah. And when she had the chance to acknowledge that, she chose to act like it wasn't enough. I can't keep being her backup plan whenever things don't go her way. Sarah did not comprehend. To her, blood always came first, even if it had just made empty promises. The chat ended in silence, but something altered between us. An invisible wall appeared where none had before existed. Emma has not contacted me since. Sarah told me shortly after that call that Andrew was furious with me for abandoning Emma in a difficult situation. Mark had apparently vanished, with no calls, messages, or other indications. I suppose Emma was now realizing the truth, but it didn't erase what she had done or how she had made me feel. That night, alone in the living room, I replayed every moment I had spent with Emma, every time she smiled and called me Dad. And then I knew something. I'd always assumed the title was a decision, a sign that I'd earned my place in her life. But now I wonder whether it was just a convenient word for her, something she said when it suited her. I'm not sure if I'll ever get over this, but one thing is certain. This time, I won't be the one who keeps giving. To be honest, I don't think I have anything left to give. 3 months have passed after the wedding, and despite my best efforts to distance myself, drama continues to find me. Sarah is continually trying to mend things between Emma and me, gazing at me with a mix of disappointment and imploring, as if waiting for me to give in and return to being the man who never said no. But she doesn't realize, or refuses to accept, that something within me altered that day. I can't simply go back to how things were. Since the call in which I declined to pay for Emma's honeymoon, our relationship has entirely vanished. She hasn't contacted me, and while that stung at first, it now feels like relief. There will be no more solicitations for money disguised as casual check-ins. What surprised me was how rapidly issues arose in her marriage. Sarah, of course, remained in constant communication with Emma and casually mentioned it over dinner one night. "Emma and Andrew are struggling financially," she moaned loudly. "Andrew lost his job, and they're having trouble paying rent." I kept eating, knowing what was coming. Sarah continued, "Don't you think we should help them? She's our daughter after all." I sat down with my fork and took a long breath. "I'm not her father anymore, Sarah. According to Emma, that role belongs to Mark. So if she needs help, she should ask him." Sarah glanced at me as if I'd just said something terrible. "How can you be so cold? She's always counted on you. You can't turn your back on her now." I laughed bitterly. Cold? Cold is what she did to me at her wedding, because honestly, that's exactly how it felt. Cold and invisible, like I never spent 2 decades being the one who was there for her. If Mark is her father for the big moments, then he can be her father in the difficult ones too. This concluded our conversation. Sarah stormed away, carrying her plate to the sink. That night, we slept silently, with our backs to each other. It pained that this was damaging our relationship, but I couldn't keep being the man who gave and gave while receiving nothing in return. Despite everything, Emma reached out quickly, albeit not explicitly. A week later, I received a message from Andrew. He wrote, short but desperate, "Hey, it's Andrew, Emma's husband. I need to talk to you about something important. Do you have time?" I didn't immediately respond. I left the message there as a reminder of how dramatically things had changed. I read it several times, knowing exactly what he wanted: money. There was always money. I eventually decided to hear him out. I had nothing to lose. We met in a neighborhood cafe. Andrew was already there, nervously tapping his foot and looking at the untouched coffee. I sat down silently, expecting him to speak first. "Thanks for coming," he finally murmured, his tone lacking sincerity. It seemed more like an obligation. "I know things have been tense between you and Emma, but we're going through a difficult time and I was hoping you could help." There it was, the expected request. I kept my expression neutral. "What do you need?" I inquired, despite the fact that I already knew. Andrew groaned and stared at his coffee, as if looking for the proper words. "Emma and I have been struggling financially since the honeymoon. I recently lost my job, and we are now behind on rent. If we don't pay in 2 weeks, we will be evicted." I nodded carefully, allowing his words to sink in before asking the one question he clearly hadn't expected. "Have you asked Mark?" Andrew looked up, puzzled. "Mark?" "No, we haven't talked to him. Emma thought you might be able to help. You've always been there for her." I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly one. It was bitter. "Ironic." "Exactly," I murmured, leaning forward. "And yet, when she had to choose, she picked Mark. So no, Andrew, I won't be helping this time. Maybe it's time for Mark to finally step up for once." Andrew tried to argue that it wouldn't be fair if they were evicted. That it wasn't only about Emma, but also about him. I raised a hand to stop him. "This conversation is over," I stated firmly. "I wish you both the best, but I can't keep solving your problems." I stood up, leaving him to his cold coffee and frustration. When I arrived home, Sarah was waiting for me, like if she knew what had happened. I didn't give her any specifics because she didn't need them. She could tell I'd declined to help. Emma and Andrew have since stopped trying. Sarah is still unhappy, but she has stopped pushing me to give in. But something tells me that this is not over. When a castle collapses, there is always more rubble to come. 6 months have passed since the wedding, and to be honest, they have felt weirdly liberated. I've held steadfast in my choice not to get involved in Emma and Andrew's troubles, even if it means dealing with Sarah's persistent resentment. She does not say it directly, but I can see it in her eyes. She hasn't forgiven me for what she considers a betrayal. No matter how many times I explain that this is not about money, but about respect, she either doesn't get it or refuses to. But the space between Emma and me has provided unexpected solace. For the first time in years, I am free of the burden of always being the one to keep everything together. I've refocused on myself, taken up old hobbies like woodworking, and spent more time with friends, things I'd neglected for far too long. I felt awful at first for taking this space for myself, but now I see it as vital. Still, the drama has not subsided. Sarah told me a few weeks ago that Emma and Andrew had finally been evicted. They couldn't come up with enough money to catch up on rent, and their landlord lost patience. They're now staying with Andrew's mother in a tight apartment that barely fits 2 people, let alone a married couple. Sarah was outraged as she told me this. "This wouldn't have happened if you had helped them," she added, her tone heavy with the now familiar blame. I did not bother answering. Whatever I said, Sarah would always perceive me as the villain responsible for Emma's problems. What she doesn't know is that deep down, I know I did the right thing. Emma chose to throw me aside, and now she has to deal with the repercussions. Sarah finds it ironic that Mark has been absolutely absent during this. He didn't even answer when Emma asked for aid. It's not surprising, given his track record of unreliability. But I find it odd that, despite Emma's efforts to elevate him, he is nowhere to be found when she needs him the most. Sarah told me something a few days ago when she was making dinner, and it almost made me chuckle. Emma says Mark promised to help her find a new place to live, but he still hasn't followed through. He says he's waiting for his finances to stabilize. I arched an eyebrow, staring at her in amazement. And Emma still believes him? After a lifetime of broken promises, she still believes him? I inquired, not angry, but really curious. Sarah sighed and looked at me with despair. "He's her father," she stated simply, as if this explained everything. That exchange stuck in my memory for years. I had attempted to replace the vacuum Mark had left in Emma's life, but now I wondered if it had all been in vain. Perhaps biology has always been more important to her than her deeds. Perhaps I was never competing with Mark's presence, but with the mere fact that he existed. Emma finally contacted me around a week ago. Surprisingly, it was not about money. She sent a message indicating she wanted to meet and speak. I was hesitant to respond for a long time, but curiosity eventually won out. We met at a park that she used to frequent when she was younger. Emma was already there, sitting on a bench and nervously fidgeting with her hands. When I approached, she rose up and gave me a cautious hug. One that did not feel sincere, but which I accepted out of politeness. We sat for a few minutes in awkward silence. Then she began speaking, but not about why she had summoned me there. Instead, she talked about how difficult it was to live with Andrew's mother, the strain in her marriage, and how much she missed her own space. I listened without interrupting. I could see she had a lot to unload. She finally came to the point. "Dad," she murmured, a word that once meant a lot to me but now feels hollow. "I know I've disappointed you. I know the wedding hurt you, and I don't think I realized how much until it was too late." I waited, allowing her to continue. Inside, I felt a range of feelings, including disbelief, sadness, and lingering bitterness. Emma took a big breath before saying, "I just want to say I'm sorry for how things turned out. I never meant to make you feel replaced." "But you did," I said calmly and firmly. "Not just at the wedding, Emma. Every time you ignored everything I did for you, every time you chose to see Mark as something he never was. You say you didn't want me to feel replaced, but honestly, I don't think I was ever in that place to begin with." Emma looked down, clearly startled by my remarks. Perhaps she expected me to simply take her apologies and go back to the way things had been, but that wasn't an option anymore. Certain things, once broken, cannot be fixed. The conversation came to an end shortly thereafter. As we said our goodbyes, she told me she hoped we might repair our connection over time. I didn't answer, not because I didn't want it to happen, but because I wasn't sure it could. Emma didn't simply break my heart, she also shattered something deeper, my faith in her. Update: I did something that Sarah and Emma will never forgive me for, and I'm not sure whether I should even seek forgiveness. My relationship with Sarah has deteriorated beyond what I could have imagined during the last year, following the wedding. What began as an emotional distance has grown into an insurmountable divide. We no longer feel the love, bond, or respect that we once had. We still share a house, but not our lives. Since the wedding, there has been no intimacy. At first, I assumed it was a momentary reaction to stress, but as the months went, I realized Sarah was more than upset. She was bitter. She blamed me for Emma's pain, and this anger permeated every aspect of our marriage. We used to spend our nights talking or watching movies, but now they are silent. Every time I try to reach out, she pulls back, creating a barrier between us. In the midst of this desolation, Sophie, Sarah's best friend, joined my life. She had always been Emma's delightful aunt, bringing her lavish gifts and telling humorous stories. However, after the wedding, something changed. She began phoning more frequently, checking up on me. At first, I assumed she was attempting to help Sarah and me reconcile. But as time passed, I understood it was more than that. Sophie was the only person who really listened. She told me something no one else had. That I was correct. That my feelings were genuine. That I had been treated unfairly, and that Sarah was being unkind to me. I grew to look forward to our chats. She did not perceive me as the villain in this scenario. I will not suggest that this was planned, since it was not. It just happened, like a river discovering a new route. One night, after another lengthy conversation, we sat in silence, just looking at each other. We had discussed everything. How I felt invisible in my own home, how Sarah had become chilly, and how my life seemed to be crumbling apart. Sophie suddenly seized my hand and said something that left me speechless. "You deserve to be happy, and they aren't letting you." I'm not sure what made me lean in, her voice, the way she looked at me, but before I knew it, I was kissing her, and she didn't move away. That night, I did not go home. I spent the hours with Sophie, talking and laughing, allowing months of repressed feelings to surface. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I felt wanted. Most significantly, I felt understood. I know I'm doing something wrong, yet I don't regret it. Sophie has been my sanctuary, someone who actually sees me. I found with her what I had lost with Sarah: connection. Sarah suspects something. She observes me when I arrive home late or leave to answer messages, but she has not confronted me. Sophie too experiences guilt, but neither of us regrets our actions. I know this cannot endure. When Sarah finds out, there is no turning back. But for the time being, I don't feel alone. Final update. 2 years have gone. Looking back, it seems like a faraway storm, yet the wounds linger. I've rebuilt my life, but I'm not sure if I can ever reverse the harm. Sarah and Emma cut me out totally, which freed me. When I eventually admitted, Sarah's reaction was even more strong than I had anticipated. She confronted me before I could respond. "What is this? I've seen the way you've changed. Tell me the truth," I said. "Sophie and we've been seeing each other. She was there for me when no one else was." Sarah's expression shifted from disbelief to wrath. Then followed the words that still haunt me. "So all of it, everything we built, meant nothing to you?" I stood there, speechless. All I had done was try to keep my family together, but I had failed. "Sarah," I replied, my voice quivering. While you were trying to save Emma, I lost myself, and you didn't even notice. She yelled so loudly that it hurt. What you've done is unforgivable. How could you destroy our family? Emma walked in. She already knew. Her voice was icy. I thought you were better than this, but you never cared, did you? You just wanted to be the hero, and look at what you've done. That's not true, I replied, frightened. You pushed me away. You chose Mark, and when you needed something, I was just supposed to fix it. But when I gave you everything, it was never enough. Was it enough? Sarah cried. That doesn't justify this betrayal. Clara, let him go. And with that, they urged me to leave and never contact them again. It stung, but I felt relieved. There was nothing more to save. I relocated to a little flat. The divorce procedure was arduous, but the legal struggle was not the most painful part. It was realizing that the life I had built was over. Sophie was there for me throughout it all, providing comfort and motivation. She did not excuse my mistakes, but she also did not criticize me. Months later, as I was finally getting my life back together, I received a message from Emma. Dad, I know I hurt you. I know I failed you, but you will always be my father. I'm sorry. I know things will never be the same, but I will always love you. I did not respond right away. The wounds were still too deep. Maybe one day I'll find peace, but for now, I'm moving on, regardless of what I've left behind. Excluded from Christmas for being a plumber, I cut off my sister's law school money. Now she's begging, and I'm better off without her. Okay, so I've been sitting on this story for a long, trying to figure out where to even begin describing this disaster. I suppose I should introduce myself first. I'm 32, unmarried, and own my own plumbing business. Yeah, I know, it's not the most glamorous job, according to certain people, including my family. But, to be honest, I make a lot of money and enjoy my job. There's something rewarding about fixing difficulties and assisting others, even if it occasionally requires dealing with their literalism. LOL. Amanda, my 26-year-old sister, is currently attending law school, which I have been paying for. Yeah, you read that correctly. I've been paying her full tuition since she started. Her lover was a hotshot doctor at the local hospital, a real piece of work. But we will get to him later. So this is where things went awry. About a week before Christmas, I received this call from my mother. Now, you have to realize something about my mother. She never calls just to speak or check on me. It's always because she wants something or there's a family issue that needs to be resolved, usually involving money, to be honest. However, this call was different. She begins with a strange, hesitant tone, as if she is about to tell you that your dog has died. Then she lays the bombshell on me. I'm not invited to Christmas this year. Just like that. There is no notice, discussion, or anything. At first, I assumed I misheard her, as if she had said they were altering the date or something. But, nah. She goes on to say that it might be best if I sit this one out because they want to keep things comfortable for everyone. I'm sitting there, thinking, what the actual, one, since this is so unexpected. We've always celebrated Christmas together, even while I was working long hours to get my business off the ground. Sure, my family has always been odd about my job. They enjoy the money I make, but God forbid they tell anyone what their son and brother does for a living. So I pressed her on it, asking, what's the real reason? She began hedging and hawing, talking in circles about professional looks and everyone's comfort, but she refused to give me a clear answer. It wasn't until later that day that I learned the true cause, from my cousin Sarah. She'd overheard Amanda discussing it with our mother earlier that week. Apparently, my lovely sister had informed our parents that having me for Christmas would be awkward because I did not fit in with her and her boyfriend's professional standing. Allow that to soak in for a minute. My own sister, who I've been helping through her law school, was ashamed to have me for Christmas because I'm only a plumber. She was concerned about how her fancy doctor partner would react to having to sit at the same table as someone who worked with their hands for a career. The more I thought about it, the more things fell into place, like how Amanda never invited me to any of her law school events, despite the fact that I was paying for her to attend, or how she always changed the subject when her friends asked what her brother did for a living, or how she never introduced me to her boyfriend, despite the fact that they'd been dating for nearly a year. Do you know what the worst part was? My parents agreed with her. They truly believed it was okay to exclude their own son from Christmas because his employment would make their beloved daughter's boyfriend uncomfortable. The same son who has been providing for the family since he was 18. The same son who built his own successful firm from the beginning. The same son who has been paying for their golden child's law school education without complaint. My mother tried to sugarcoat it with phrases like, well, honey, you know how these professional circles are. And maybe, next year, when you've developed your career more. What the boss does that even mean? I own my own business. I have staff. I earn 6 figures performing honest work. But apparently it isn't evolved enough because I don't wear a suit and tie to work. I spent the entire day stewing over this information, growing increasingly irritated. Not the heated, angry type of pissed off, but rather a cool, calm knowledge that my family, particularly my sister, had been exploiting me while being ashamed of me the entire time. That's when I decided it was enough. If I was too embarrassed to bring to Christmas dinner, my money would be too embarrassing to spend for law school. What kind of message would it send to my sister's fancy beau if he discovered her law degree was paid for by a gas-passing plumber? But hold on, this is only the beginning. The real, what AITA show began when I made the decision to take action. And let me tell you, karma is especially when it comes with the accompanying student loan burden. So, after learning that I was barred from celebrating Christmas because my blue-collar profession would insult my sister's boyfriend's delicate sensibilities, I was in a strange state of mind. You know that feeling when you're so enraged that you suddenly become strangely calm? That is where I was at. I spent the entire night reading over previous text messages and discussions with Amanda. And holy, guys, the signs were everywhere. I was simply too blind, or perhaps foolish to see them. For example, last spring, she had a graduation party to celebrate finishing her first year of law school. I had truly paid for the entire year, but I didn't receive an invitation. When I approached her about it, she lied about it being a minor issue in her study group. Later, I learned from Facebook that it was a large party at a posh downtown restaurant. Then there was the time when she required a new laptop for class. Despite the fact that I am very knowledgeable about computers, she asked me to simply transfer the money to her account rather than accompany her to choose it. Nowadays, it's almost a requirement. Even in plumbing, we use tablets and specialized software to provide job bids and schedule appointments. She said that she was too busy to go shopping together. But now I'm quite sure she didn't want to be seen with her plumber brother in the Apple store. Looking back, it's sort of funny in a sad way. For example, whenever she needed money, which was often, she would text her humiliating blue-collar brother. But when it came to acknowledging my presence in her fancy new life, the radio is silent. I decided to dig. The benefits of having a cousin who is still on the family group chat, LOL. Amanda had been preparing for the Christmas exclusion for weeks. She told our parents that her boyfriend, Craig, yes, his name is Craig, was from a very prestigious family, and she was concerned about making a good impression. Apparently, having a plumber sibling may harm her professional prospects, or some elitist, like that. Want to know the true kicker? My cousin Sarah, bless her messy, drama-loving heart, forwarded me screenshots of Amanda's remarks from the family chat. She had actually written, and I'm quoting this directly, "I just don't want Craig to think our family isn't, educated. It could affect how his family sees me, and they have so many connections in the legal world. Educated? Educated." I wanted to respond and inform her that the reason she's getting an education is because her uneducated plumber brother pays $43,000 per year in school. But I held back. I was beginning to formulate a strategy, and sometimes you have to play the long game. As I thought about it, I realized it wasn't only about Christmas. This was about years of my family, particularly Amanda, treating me as a filthy little secret. They were pleased to accept my dirty plumber money, but God forbid they acknowledge how I earned it. Here's a fascinating truth about plumbing that most people don't know. We have to study extensively. For example, years of apprenticeship, license examinations, and ongoing education to stay current with new legislation and technologies. I probably spent more time researching water systems and construction codes than Amanda did studying tort law. But because I work with my hands, they treat me like an idiot who couldn't make it in the real professional world. The reality is, I selected plumbing because I am skilled at it and saw an opportunity. I began working as an apprentice right out of high school, learned everything I could, obtained my licenses, and eventually launched my own firm. I currently have 3 vehicles on the road, 2 full-time staff, and more work than I can handle. But to my family, I am still the embarrassing brother who fixes toilets. I kept thinking about all the times I went late at work or did additional work to make sure I could pay Amanda's tuition. All those times I postponed purchasing new items for myself or contributing more to my retirement account because family came first. Meanwhile, she was actively attempting to conceal my existence from her new lover and his family. That's when my cousin threw another bomb at me. Craig's family did not appear to be overly concerned with such matters. His uncle, a successful contractor, built their family house. Amanda had simply assumed they would look down on me since that is how she sees me. I sat with all of this information for a few days, monitoring the family group chat via Sarah. They'd removed me from it weeks ago, ostensibly to minimize any discomfort surrounding Christmas arrangements. Amanda was going on and on about how pleased she was to host Craig for Christmas dinner, how his family had ties at all of the city's large law firms, and how this could be her opportunity to earn a summer position through his contacts. No one stood up for me the entire time, not my parents, nor any of my other relatives. Nobody remarked, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't exclude the guy who's been supporting Amanda through school." Everyone was just pleased about Amanda getting a prestigious internship through her boyfriend's family. That's when I realized exactly what I needed to do. If they wanted to pretend they didn't have a plumber in the family, I'd help them make that lie a reality, beginning with Amanda's tuition payments. So, after stewing over all this nonsense for a few days, I decided it was time to make my move. But here's the thing. I didn't want to write a furious text or anything. I wanted to do it in such a manner that they couldn't distort my words or make me look like the evil person, which is, incidentally, my family's favorite hobby. I waited until I knew Amanda's next tuition payment was coming due. It was due in about 2 weeks, and she was always really worried around this time. Normally, she'd start dropping subtle hints about remembering the payment deadline, like, "Oh, the school's been sending reminder emails," or something. What about this time? The radio is silent. She must have assumed that the payment would simply come, as it always did, even after they had barred me from attending Christmas. Quick side note, I had been paying my tuition payments straight to the institution using their online portal. Amanda had set it up herself when she first started, and she provided me all of the login information, which was really convenient since she considered me as her personal ATM. Right? Anyway, I got into the portal and noticed my upcoming payment. $21,500 for the spring semester. That's when I realized how much money I'd been putting at her studies while she was actively attempting to conceal my existence from her boyfriend. Do you know how many toilets you need to fix to generate that much money? Answer: a lot more than most people realize. So I phoned Amanda. I didn't text her, I called because I wanted to hear her voice when I dropped the bomb. She picked up on the third ring, sounded angry, as if I was interrupting something essential. "Hey," she remarked in that tone that shouts, "Make it quick, I'm kind of in the middle of something." "Oh, sorry," I replied, attempting to sound nonchalant. "Just wanted to talk about your tuition payment. It's due soon, right?" Her voice changed instantly. Suddenly, she became all lovely and interested. "Oh yeah, thanks for remembering. It's due on the 15th. You're still okay to cover it, right?" "Actually," I replied. "I've been thinking about what you told Mom and Dad about Christmas, about how having a plumber brother might embarrass you in front of Craig and his family." There was complete stillness on her end. You could almost hear her brain short-circuiting as she attempted to figure out how to spin this. "That's not who told you that," she eventually exclaimed. "Does it matter?" I inquired. "Is it true or not?" More silence. Then she sought to enter damage control mode. "Listen, you don't understand. Craig's family, they're really particular about these things. His father's a judge. His mother's on all these charity boards. I just thought it would be better if you pretended your brother doesn't exist." I completed for her. "Because he's just a lowly plumber." "That's not fair," she complained. "I never said that. I need them to take me seriously if I want to have a future in law. You know how these circles work." I couldn't help laughing. "Actually, I don't know how these circles work. I'm just a plumber, remember? But you know what I do know? The exact amount I've paid for your law school so far. Want me to break it down for you?" She began to say something, but I continued going. "First year costs $43,000. Second year, first semester cost $21,500. Plus all the other costs, your laptop, textbooks, and that special study program you simply had to have. According to my calculations, that's around $770,000 thus far. Everything was paid for by your embarrassing plumber brother." "Why are you acting like this?" she moaned. "You know how important this is for my future. Craig's family has connections at all the top firms, and having a plumber brother would ruin that." I inquired. "Even though that plumber brother is the only reason you're in law school in the first place?" "You promised to help me," she replied. "You said you'd support my dreams." That's when I said it. "Yeah, I did, when you were proud to call me your brother. But if I'm too embarrassed to have Christmas dinner, then I guess my money should be too embarrassing to pay for your tuition." "You guys," the screech that came out of her mouth sounded like a pterodactyl's tail being stepped on. "You can't do that," she shouted. "The payment is due in 2 weeks. What am I supposed to do?" "I don't know," I responded, feeling strangely peaceful. "Maybe ask Craig. I'm sure his fancy doctor salary could cover it." Or is my dirty plumber money the only kind you're willing to touch? She began crying, full on dramatic sobbing. Please, she asked. I'll tell Mom and Dad I was wrong. You can come to Christmas. Just please don't do this to me. No, I replied. I don't want to come to Christmas. I don't want to embarrass you in front of Craig and his family. In fact, I don't want anything to do with any of you anymore. Consider this my last payment to the family that's ashamed of me. I hung up while she was still crying and begging and immediately banned her phone number. I poured myself a drink and braced myself for the impending AITA storm. After that, everything began. My mom came first. She called around 5 times in a row before I eventually answered. The moment I responded, she launched into guilt trips, which are her specialty. She was crying about how I was wrecking the family and Amanda's future due to a silly misunderstanding. Silly misunderstanding? I asked. She literally told you she was ashamed of what I do for a living. The same job that's been paying her tuition. She didn't mean it like that, Mom explained. You know how Amanda is. She just gets caught up in trying to impress people sometimes. She looks up to you. I almost choked on my drink. She basically barred me from Christmas because she was humiliated by me. How the hell is that looking up to me? Then Mom took a different approach. Consider what this will do to her relationship with Craig. His family might greatly benefit her career. Oh, so you want to talk about Craig? I interrupted her off. It's funny how important he and his family are, yet your own son isn't even good enough to sit at the Christmas table. She started blubbering about how that wasn't what we meant and how I was taking everything too personally, which is a typical mom move, trying to make me feel like I'm overreacting when they're the ones being nasty. When my father called, he went straight for the angry approach, which was unsurprising, and he started ranting about how I was being selfish and vengeful, calling me a little one for endangering Amanda's education. Isn't that Father of the Year material? Let me get this straight, I told him. I'm a little mainamwadan for not wanting to spend thousands of dollars on someone who is ashamed of me. Make it make sense, Dad. We raised you to be better than this, he hissed. Family supports family, I replied. Really? Is that what you intended when you agreed to exclude me from Christmas? Was that a supportive family? He tried to explain himself by claiming that sometimes we had to make sacrifices for the better welfare of the family, which apparently included kissing Craig's ass in the hopes that he would boost Amanda's career. But what really struck me was that no one apologized for how they treated me during any of these calls. Instead, it was all about how I was bad for sticking up for myself, how I was being petty and vengeful, and how I was letting my pride get in the way of family. Then came the flying monkeys. My aunt called to tell me how disappointed she was in my behavior, my uncle texted, saying I needed to man up and be the bigger person, and even my cousin Sarah, who told me about Amanda's lies, messaged me, saying maybe I was taking things too far. But you know what? None of them offered to help pay Amanda's tuition themselves. The best part? Amanda actually went and told Craig what was going on, and I guess she thought he'd offer to help with the tuition instead. According to Sarah, who's still keeping me updated, Craig got really quiet and started asking questions, like, why hadn't Amanda ever mentioned she had a brother? Why didn't she introduce them? Why did her brother pay for her law school in the first place? Craig couldn't understand why Amanda would keep her brother's existence hidden just because he was a plumber. It turned out that his uncle, the one who built their family home, started as a plumber before becoming a contractor, and Craig had actually worked summers with him in high school. When Amanda tried to explain her reasoning, she just dug herself deeper. She started talking about professional appearances and social circles, and Craig got more and more upset, saying he couldn't believe she'd hide and disrespect her own brother, who'd been supporting her education, just for some perceived social status. Craig told her the next day that he wanted time to think about their relationship because her actions revealed a side of her personality that he didn't like. Who knew he had principles? Meanwhile, my parents were constantly blowing up my phone. Mom alternated between crying and begging, Dad between cursing and threatening, Amanda kept calling from other numbers after I blocked hers, and I ultimately turned off my phone for a few days. It was all about how I was ruining everything by not just shutting up and paying like a good little ATM, but I was done being their ATM. If standing up for myself made me the bad guy in their eyes, so be it. It was better than being their doormat. After a few days, Craig came over to Amanda's apartment. She probably thought he was there to make up, but no, he broke up with her. He said he couldn't be with someone who would treat their own brother that way, especially someone who had supported them so much. He said it made him question her values and who she truly was. Amanda lost her internet and contacted me crying and shouting from yet another new number. She's had more burner phones than a drug dealer at this point. She said I'd wrecked everything, that Craig broke up with her because of me, that her life was falling apart, and it was all my fault. I laughed and replied, "No, sis. Craig ended his relationship with you after discovering your true identity. I just stopped helping you hide it." She threatened to tell everyone that I had sexually assaulted her in high school, that she would report my business to the Better Business Bureau for fraud, and that everyone would know what a terrible brother I was. "Go ahead," I told her. "Tell everyone your brother is a monster because he checks notes, paid for your education while you tried to conceal his existence. See how that works out for you." Then she went back to begging, crying about how she couldn't afford law school without me, how she'd have to drop out, how she'd lose all of her friends, and how her life would end. "Guess you should have thought about that before you decided I was too embarrassing to acknowledge," I responded. Then I disconnected. After Craig dumped her, Amanda had a complete mental breakdown, according to Sarah. She began showing up at our parents' house at random hours, crying about how her life had ended. She had apparently told all her law school friends that her boyfriend was going to help her with tuition, so when he dumped her instead, she was completely screwed. The deadline for the tuition payment was approaching, and she still hadn't figured out what to do. She tried applying for emergency loans, but guess what? Those take time to process, and she left it way too late. Plus, she'd need a cosigner, and our parents' credit is a mess. I wonder why they keep trying to live beyond their means. Sarah texted me. 911, Amanda just posted on Facebook that she's heading to your shop to make you face what you're doing to her. She appears unstable? I barely had time to warn my guys before she blasted through the door like a tornado in designer clothes, hair all messy, mascara running, full crazy ex-girlfriend energy, except she was my sister. "How could you do this to me?" She screamed in front of my entire staff and about 3 customers, "I'm your sister, you're meant to look after me." I attempted to encourage her to go outside or at least lower her voice, but she seemed determined to cause a disturbance. "You are ruining my life," she screamed, "all because your delicate feelings were harmed. You are so selfish." One of my clients, a sweet old lady who had been with us for years, stood up. "Young lady," she asked, "is this the brother who has been paying for your education?" Amanda turned around as if she'd been smacked. "That's none of your business." "Well," the elderly lady added, "you just made it everyone's business by storming in here shouting. And, based on what I've heard, you excluded your brother from Christmas because you were ashamed of his profession, but you still expect him to pay for your education. That's known as biting the hand that feeds you, in my hometown." The look on Amanda's face, she genuinely didn't know how to handle someone calling her out on her BS who wasn't family, but she recovered fast and shifted to crying, like full-blown theatrical sobbing. "You don't understand," she cried. "He is doing this to punish me. He's attempting to harm my future because he's envious of my achievement." I couldn't help laughing. "What success, Amanda? The success of convincing your partner to dump you? The success of maybe having to drop out of law school? The success of embarrassing yourself in front of my staff and customers? At the very least, I'm making an effort to establish myself." She shot out, not just playing with pipes all day like some. She had to stop herself, perhaps realizing she was about to degrade plumbing in front of a group of plumbers. My senior employee, Mike, went up, and heck, a large fellow who's been with me since I started the business, said, "Ma'am," in a dead serious tone, "I think you should leave now. For the past 5 years, your brother's pipe playing has provided for my family's needs. It paid for my children's braces and my wife's automobile, and it appears to have paid for your law school as well. So maybe offer some respect." Amanda looked around and realized she wasn't receiving the reaction she had hoped for. Everyone was staring at her as if she were insane, which, to be honest, she was. She tried one more time. "Okay, I'll tell everyone what type of brother you really are. I'll post about it all over social media." "Go ahead," I urged. "Make sure you mention the bit where you had me banned from Christmas because you were embarrassed by my employment but still expected me to pay your tuition. I'm sure that will bring you a lot of sympathy." She stormed off after that, but not before knocking down our sign and clipboard and kicking a display of business cards off the counter. "Very mature, sis?" The elderly customer approached me after Amanda left, stroked my arm, and said, "You know, my late husband was a plumber. Put all 3 of our children through college. They never once expressed embarrassment about what he performed for a living." Then Mom looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're doing the right thing, honey. Sometimes family members have to learn the hard way that respect is a two-way street." After that scene, I had to sit down with my staff and explain the situation, and they were remarkably nice about it. Mike even remarked that his family's Thanksgiving drama was boring in contrast. So after the whole explosion at my business, Amanda decided to go nuclear. She started calling every single member of our extended family, telling them this sob story about how her cruel brother was attempting to ruin her future out of spite. But here's the thing about family drama. Everyone loves to get involved, but no one wants to actually assist. The first one was Aunt Karen. Yes, that's her name, and yes, she lives up to it. Who got me all wound up about family obligations and how I was selfish. This is the same aunt who borrowed $5,000 from me 3 years ago for emergency dental work and never paid it back. The conversation went as follows. "How could you do this to your sister?" she demanded. "She's striving to improve herself." "Funny," I responded. "I do not recall you agreeing to assist pay for her law school. You still owe me for your teeth, by the way." There is no more sound. That's different," she sputtered. "How dare you bring it up?" "Is it different?" I inquired. "Because, from where I stand, this entire family enjoys talking about helping each other until it comes time to actually help. Then suddenly, everyone goes quiet." She hung up on me after that. I guess the reality hurts more than those teeth did. Then there was Uncle Steve, my father's brother. He's this wannabe big shot who's always boasting about his investment portfolio but never has money when the restaurant bill arrives, and he tried to lecture me about family investments. "Think of it as an investment in your sister's future," he told me. "When she's a successful lawyer, she'll be able to help you." I laughed so hard at it. "Can you help me?" She couldn't even bear to have me for Christmas dinner because I'm a plumber. "But, okay, tell me more about how she'll help me once she's successful." "Well," he said, "maybe you could help her finish school, and she could pay you back." "Great idea," I remarked. "Why don't you lend her the money then? You're always raving about your fantastic investments. Here's an opportunity to invest in my family." He suddenly had to leave. It's amazing how this keeps happening. The best part was that no one who called to guilt trip me offered to really help Amanda themselves. They all had opinions on what I should do with my money, but their own wallets remained firmly closed. I'm done with her, and I'll keep you all posted if anything occurs. Final update. My sister had me excluded from Christmas because I'm only a plumber, so I took away her law school funds. Hey everyone, I figured I'd post one last update because so many people have been messaging me asking what happened. I heard from a mutual friend that my sister showed up at her ex-boyfriend's house uninvited and tried to talk to Craig's parents. She told them this whole sob story about how she was about to lose everything and needed help, but she didn't mention hiding me because I'm a plumber. Craig was obviously present and gave them the complete truth, but his father, the judge, appeared to glance at her and say, "Young lady, if you're trying to be a lawyer, you should know that attempting to manipulate people by telling half-truths is not a good start to your career." In the end, she had to drop out of law school because she couldn't get private loans without a cosigner, and no one in the family was willing to cosign after what happened. When Grandma got involved and told them they should be ashamed of themselves, even my parents stopped asking for my help. Amanda is now working as a paralegal at a small law company. According to Sarah, she claims it is only temporary until she can return to law school, but we all know that is unlikely. As for me, business is stronger than ever, and I've actually grown to 2 more trucks and employed 4 new workers. I still meet up with Craig and his uncle Mike for beers on occasion, and it turns out we get along really well when there's no family turmoil involved. My parents tried to reconcile around Thanksgiving, but only because they needed help with their mortgage. I declined and told them that maybe they should ask their successful lawyer daughter for help. Oh wait, funny thing is, I actually feel better now that everything's out in the open. No more pretending, no more being the family ATM, no more walking on eggshells about my job, just me, my successful business, and my actual friends who don't give a and what I do for a living. Thank you for your support, Reddit. Sometimes you need strangers on the internet to confirm you're not insane for standing up for yourself. Edit. Holy, this blew out. Thanks for all the accolades, and to everyone who DM'd me about needing a plumber in my region. Sorry, I'm trying to remain anonymous here. Edit 2. To everyone who says I ruined my sister's life, she did it herself. I simply stopped paying it. My half-sister destroyed my marriage, stole the life I once had, and now she wants me to officiate her wedding, but I had a plan for revenge. My husband Jerry, 52 male, and I, 48 female, had been together for about 12 years and married for 10. We were so joyful at the beginning, you know? Every moment we spent together was a source of delight, filled our days with laughter, dreams, and the little things that made us love each other even more. We were a team, tackling life together. Our smiles were contagious, and everything seemed a little better when we were together. We soaked up the love we had, from cozy Sundays to odd date nights that just made everything feel great. Life was simple and we enjoyed every moment of it. But suddenly, things began to shift. Date nights became stressful, and the casual laughter was no longer as loud as it always was. I started noticing that he was spending more and more time on his phone than with me. Date nights were no longer lighthearted. There was a palpable strain in the air. Our happiness had begun to fade, and I couldn't escape the feeling that our relationship was slipping away from me. The intimacy we previously shared was fading, replaced by a growing distance that seemed difficult to repair. I began to suspect Jerry might be having an affair. Late-night phone calls and odd messages became too common for me to dismiss. I questioned his behavior changes, as well as the fact that he felt distant even when we were only inches apart. But Jerry ignored it, claiming that I was reading too much into his conduct and that he was simply preoccupied at work. In my gut, I knew it wasn't just paranoia. It was a feeling that our marriage was taking an unforeseen turn. On a Friday evening, I planned to surprise Jerry with a dinner date, hoping to revive our relationship. I eagerly went to his office to pick him up, anticipating a night of connection and joy. However, my elation quickly changed to regret when he sent me a message saying he would be working late owing to an onerous workload. I sighed, accepting the change in plans without letting him know I was waiting for him below. I was about to depart when I noticed Jerry exiting his employment, which surprised me. This confused me because it contradicted his message about a difficult workload. Puzzled, I watched him get into his car and drive away. I decided to follow him instinctively, with curiosity in my heart. Little did I know that what I was about to witness would rock me to my core. I followed him as he pulled into a pub. I wasn't sure what he was doing there. Why did he lie to me about this? As I quietly studied him at the bar, my greatest suspicions were clear. He was meeting a woman. I remained there, stunned, as the woman's back appeared familiar to me. The mystery woman then moved to sit in front of him, and my eyes widened in surprise as I realized it was my stepsister Karen. I could feel my legs giving out from shock, and I nearly fainted in front of the bar. While spying on them, I noticed my husband and Karen holding hands and smiling lovingly at one another. The understanding hit me like a gut punch, and I had an intense want to vomit. The overwhelming contempt, along with the betrayal, left me with a range of feelings, wondering how to respond to the extent of his deception. I recall leaving the bar in a trance, hoping Jerry wouldn't catch me. That night was the most difficult one of my life. I don't think I've sobbed this much since my dog died last year. It was terrible to realize that the person I intended to spend the rest of my life with was cheating on me with my own stepsister. For some perspective on my stepsister, my parents divorced when I was very young, and my mother married her new husband Harry. Harry had a daughter from his previous marriage, Karen. Karen and I hit it off right away, despite our 4-year age difference. However, our relationship began to deteriorate as I became aware of her ability to manipulate others. She showed to be a master of deception, easily manipulating any circumstance to her benefit. Karen's manipulative abilities were unrivaled, whether it was lying to our parents to evade punishments or misleading total strangers without thinking twice. Karen was constantly jealous of me, despite the fact that we both came from shattered homes. No matter how hard I tried, she never liked me. As we grew older and eventually went to college, I saw less of her. I received a full-ride scholarship and enjoyed my college years, making new friends, trying new classes, and relishing the freedom of youth. I started coming home less and less, and eventually stopped talking to Karen except at family gatherings. Even though I kept my distance from Karen, she continued to be mean to me over the years. She would make subtle but nasty remarks about my appearance whenever we were alone at family gatherings. Whether it was a criticism about my wardrobe or a sneaky suggestion about how I should go to the gym more regularly, her words were always intended to undermine my confidence. I always tried to disregard these comments as much as possible. Karen didn't stop there. She would frequently be overly nice with my husband, who was then my boyfriend. She would make comments to him about how he deserved someone more attractive or how amazing his gym images were. Jerry used to look visibly embarrassed and flush when she complimented him. I always assumed it was just Karen being Karen. She was always inappropriate with everyone I dated and introduced to my family. Since my marriage to Jerry, she had toned down her flirty behavior, and I never gave it any attention. But after seeing them together tonight in the pub, I was convinced that this had been going on for a while. They appeared to be comfy and familiar with one another. When Jerry came back that night, I pretended to be asleep. He reeked of liquor and sweat and didn't even try to hide it. His arrogant demeanor hinted at his growing arrogance. He had begun to believe that he could just get away with anything like this. I lay awake all night, worrying about my next steps. Before Jerry awoke, I discreetly removed his phone from our bedroom to check through it. Checking his messages, calls, emails, and images, I meticulously documented proof by taking shots using my own phone. That morning, after Jerry had left for work, I decided to drive to my mother's house because I felt she was the only person who could console me. My stepfather was at work, so I felt I could speak with my mother in private. When I told my mother about my husband's romance with my stepsister, she was as startled as I was. She almost didn't believe me until I presented all the proof. She was outraged that Jerry and Karen could perform such a heinous act. My mother, being the rock she is, instantly planned to confront them in front of everyone. I could understand how upset she was since she had always treated Karen as if she were her own daughter when we were younger. We couldn't comprehend how my own stepsister could stab me in the back like this. We devised a plan to invite our close family members to supper at my place over the weekend. My mother advised me to keep my lips shut and not tell Jerry about it. Everyone arrived at the gathering looking refreshed and pleased. We all ate supper together, and while people drank wine, I looked at my mother and nodded, signifying that it was time. She understood and stood up to retrieve the projector. I clinked my glass to grab everyone's attention. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," I began, my voice firm despite the tempest of emotions within me. "I've called you all here for a special reason, something I've been struggling with for a long time. I want you to pay attention to the projector because I have a surprise for you." Curiosity filled the room as my family and friends focused their attention on the projection screen. My mother had set up the gadget, and I took a deep breath, preparing to reveal the awful truth. I connected it to my phone and started scrolling through the photographs and messages I'd saved from my husband's phone. The room fell silent as everyone focused on the television. The first image appeared, showing Jerry and Karen in an intimate stance. Gasps and murmurs echoed around the room. Everyone glanced at it, bewildered. "This is not easy for me, but I felt you all needed to know the truth," I said, my voice steady. "These pictures and messages are evidence of an affair between my husband, Jerry, and my stepsister Karen." The room erupted with amazement, indignation, and shock. As they witnessed the evidence, their eyes widened and their jaws dropped. My mother's expression was a mix of rage and sorrow, and I could feel the tension rising. She stood beside me, holding my hand, silently reassuring me that she had my back. I continued scrolling through the devastating letters, revealing the extent of the betrayal. As I divulged more, everyone's shock morphed into palpable fury. I turned to face Jerry and Karen, who were sitting in startled silence. Jerry's face flushed with guilt, while Karen, formerly manipulative and shrewd, appeared little and vulnerable. The room appeared to vibrate with the combined wrath of those present. My mother stepped forward, her voice stern and full of disappointment. "How could you do this to our family? To your spouse? Your sister?" she demanded, her gaze fixed on Jerry and Karen. My stepfather looked directly at Karen and asked whether what I had revealed was accurate. Karen fell into tears, unwilling to confront him. The weight of his remarks appeared to crush her. Other family members expressed their own disbelief and fury. Some people exchanged looks and shook their heads, while others murmured harsh remarks to one another. Jerry and Karen sat there, unable to justify their actions in the face of incriminating evidence and furious emotions. The room pulsated with the weight of the truth, and my heart, though heavy, felt strangely relieved. The secret was out, and the lie was exposed for all to see. I spoke up again, addressing the audience. "I didn't come to you all here simply to expose them. I also wanted to let you know that I'm divorcing Jerry. If Karen wants my husband, she may have him. I appreciate everyone's compassion and support during this tough time." As the shock evolved to solidarity, the entire room rallied in my favor. Friends and family sent words of consolation and condemnation to Jerry and Karen. Jerry's face turned scarlet, and he walked away humiliated. Karen followed him, evidently looking for an excuse to get out of the situation. My mother held me, and I started crying. I had kept this agony hidden inside me all along, and suddenly it was coming out. In the months after this tragedy, I found myself emotionally exhausted, unable to muster the strength to get out of bed. The weight of the betrayal, along with the tiredness of innumerable tears, had left me feeling like a hollow shell of myself. Sleep had become both a haven and an escape from my harsh life. I kicked Jerry out of our house while we worked through our divorce. It was a long and difficult path, but I knew I wanted to get divorced from him as soon as possible. 2 days ago, following months of legal proceedings, the court granted us our wish. We were formally separated. I was overjoyed and spent the day with my mother, shopping and eating ice cream. For the first time in years, I felt liberated and free. That evening, when we were seated and watching a movie at my mother's house, my stepfather entered the room, looking upset. My mother asked him what was wrong, but he looked at me with worry. I sat up straight and asked him what had occurred. He asked if I had seen Karen's recent Facebook post. I shook my head and promptly unlocked my phone, looking for her profile. With bated breath, I went on her profile to see her most recent picture with Jerry. They were smiling and looked at each other with love. She captioned it, "So happy to be engaged." As I read the caption, my breath came to a stop. Then I realized, she was wearing a ring. I was very stunned to say the least. My mother, who was staring at me curiously, seized the phone from my grasp and cried out in surprise, understanding that Karen was truly marrying Jerry. I can't recall what transpired the rest of the night. Overwhelmed by shock and amazement, I sunk back into the couch, my mind whirling with a barrage of emotions. The room seemed to press in on me as I wrestled with the truth of the situation. My mother, who was similarly astonished, attempted to console me, but words failed us both. As if things weren't awful enough, my stepfather received a call from Karen. She was presumably calling to tell him about the news. I asked him to put her on speaker so I could hear what she had to say. My stepfather nodded and took up the phone. He calmly listened as Karen raved about her engagement and how excited she was to marry Jerry. I listened to her words, devastated and absolutely empty inside. My stepdad then furiously interrupted her. "Karen, what you did today is not only disrespectful and hurtful to your stepsister, but it will have far-reaching consequences for the entire family." Karen answered, apparently upset by his reaction. "I don't understand, Dad. Jerry and I are in love and we're getting married. What's wrong with celebrating that?" My stepdad chided me. "What's wrong, Karen, is the way you've gone about it. You had an affair, and you think that's okay? Your actions have caused immense pain to someone you should consider family. Instead of being respectful and understanding, you are now flaunting your engagement in front of her and the rest of us without a thought for the consequences." Hearing his remarks, I burst into tears while my mother consoled me. I suppose this is when Karen learned my stepfather wasn't alone. She asked if I was in the room, and he confirmed. Karen then began pleading with me for a conversation. My stepfather glanced at me curiously, so I took the phone from him. I started asking her whether she realized what she was getting herself into. Karen smirked when she heard my voice and informed me she knew what she was getting into. She went on to suggest that I shouldn't be sobbing about Jerry because we were officially split and he was now free to marry her. As if that wasn't enough, Karen dropped another bombshell. Jerry and she wanted me to attend their wedding and bless them on their new path. Hearing her remarks, I felt a mixture of shock, rage, and incredulity. They wanted me to present a mask of acceptance, togetherness, and happiness when, in truth, I was dealing with the shattered shards of my own heart. The entire event felt like a sick joke on me. She began discussing how much it would mean to them if I could give a speech on their big day, indicating to everyone that I was fine with their wedding. I was stunned and at a loss for words. Without hesitation, my mother grabbed the phone from my grasp and addressed Karen directly. She stated unequivocally that Karen's actions were abhorrent and represented a new low. Karen responded angrily, stating that she and Jerry were in love and demanding that the family accept their relationship. I left my parents to deal with Karen and went to the guest bedroom, where I closed myself in and cried. I don't recall anything from the night. The next morning, I awoke angry and determined. Karen's audacious deeds kindled a fire within me. Instead than letting this knowledge devastate me, I resolved to turn the tables. I knew I had to tackle it head-on and come out stronger. I wasn't going to let them take away my happiness and mental tranquility. I had a plan in my head and was determined to make Karen regret inviting me. I opened my laptop and began browsing her social media pages. I went through every social media picture she'd ever uploaded. As luck would have it, I eventually located what I was looking for. I convened a family meeting and described my intentions. I would go to Karen and Jerry's engagement party, but not alone. I would be inviting a very important guest to be my +1, unbeknownst to Jerry and Karen. My mother glanced at me curiously as I mentioned that I would be accompanying her ex-boyfriend from college, Ron. Ron was apparently my stepsister's great love, and she even had a tattoo of his name from when they were dating. They had a painful breakup, and I knew she would be shocked to find me arm in arm with her ex. My mother's eyes widened with recognition. I gave her a cheeky look. She gave me a gentle nod of assent, indicating that she understood my plan. My stepfather, on the other hand, believed this was going too far and warned me not to ruin my stepsister's wedding. So, Reddit, do you think I'm an a-hole for inviting my stepsister's ex to her wedding after she opted to sleep with and marry my husband? Update 1. It's been a few days since I last posted an update to my narrative. Thank you for your comments. I'm astonished how many of you understand and encourage my petty behavior. I'll confess that I wanted to be the bigger person at first, but seeing Karen update more and more of her engagement photos with Jerry officially reinforced my plan, and I set it in motion. I sent Ron a friend request on Facebook and messaged him once he accepted. To my amazement, he replied, and we began communicating. I was open with him about my identification as Karen's stepsister and her soon-to-be husband's ex. I informed him of my intention to invite him as my +1 to their wedding. He appeared surprised and curious about why I was contacting him, but I explained everything. I informed him that Karen had cheated on me with my own husband and was now marrying him. I told him I wanted to take him with me so I could make Karen feel the same way she did for me. After hearing everything, Ron agreed to accompany me. I get aroused thinking about the expressions on Jerry and Karen's faces when they see me at their wedding with Ron. My stepfather has no idea I'm going to take Ron. After our recent chat, in which he discouraged me from bringing him as my +1 to Karen's wedding, I've decided to keep this knowledge private for the time being. I will notify you when the wedding takes place in a few days. Update 2, it's been a month since I last updated. As much as I wanted to update you earlier, a lot has happened in my life, and I needed some time to calm down. As I previously stated, I did take Ron with me to the wedding. When their wedding day arrived, I put on a brave face. I strolled into their wedding in Ron's arms, dressed with confidence. Jerry's eyes widened as he noticed me going in with my special guest. He must have identified Ron as Karen's ex right away. We disregarded his face and pretended to locate our assigned seats. Jerry approached me and aggressively said, "Why are you there with Karen's ex?" But I just grinned. He couldn't make a scene in front of everyone and had to reluctantly walk back up the aisle, angrily staring at me. When it was time for the bride to enter, everyone stood up from their chairs. Karen, dressed in her wedding gown, entered with my stepfather. She recognized me among the guests and smiled triumphantly. I replied with a smirk, refusing to show her my vulnerability. Then she saw Ron standing next to me and stopped dead in her tracks. The music continued, and my stepfather begged her to keep walking, but Karen refused. Her gaze moved between me and him, possibly still perplexed. I held my head high and maintained a calm posture. When my stepfather observed Karen staring at me, he looked up at both me and Ron and must have realized what was going on. The air in the room swelled with tension, and I could feel the guests' collective curiosity growing. Karen surged toward me and came to a halt in front of us, her face distorted with a combustible combination of rage and disbelief. "Congratulations, Karen," I answered calmly. "I'm genuinely happy for you both." "What the hell is this?" she said, her voice angry. I met her gaze with an unwavering stare. "This, Karen, is my +1, I said with a hint of delight in my voice. "Meet Ron. You remember him, right? From your college days? Or should I mention the tattoo on your hand?" I continued, loving her stunned expression. Ron moved forward, his countenance unreadable. "Hey, Karen, it's good to see you after so many years. We thought we'd share in the joy of your special day," he stated calmly, refusing to be drawn into a confrontation. Karen's cheeks was flushed with wrath. "Joy? You call this joy? You're ruining everything," she exclaimed, her voice breaking through the din of the crowd. The room was stunned into silence. Guests glanced at Karen, their expressions reflecting the horror that filled the air. Whispers and whispers rippled around the room, as individuals exchanged incredulous looks. Keeping my cool, I replied, "Well, Karen, it was you who graciously invited me to your wedding with Jerry, so I thought I'd return the favor and bring along your ex, Ron." The room was alive with murmurs and gasps as the visitors assessed the developing drama. Karen's eyes furrowed at me, and she appeared surprised. It was evident she had not expected such a forceful response. Ron, keeping his calm manner, added, "Karen, we're here to celebrate your happiness. There's no need to make this a scene." Karen scoffed. "Celebrate my happiness? How can you even be with someone like her? Are you dating her now?" I smiled at her scorn and, shrugging nonchalantly, responded, "Like I said, you invited me. I'm just here to honor that invitation and wish you and Jerry a lifetime of joy together. What happens between Ron and me should not be your concern, especially since you're about to marry." Karen's rage heightened the tension in the room. Jerry, who was standing at the altar, came running down, pleading with Karen not to cause a commotion so that they could continue their celebration. Karen pulled him away fiercely. Then, out of wrath, she threw her bouquet across the room. The bouquet flew into the air, leaving a trail of petals in its wake before smashing to the ground. Despite the collective gasps, Karen walked out of the theater, her gown trailing behind her in a whirl of white. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a sensation of astonishment in its wake. The visitors exchanged perplexed looks, unsure how to respond to the unexpected turn of events. Some people made awkward smiles, while others shifted uneasily in their seats. The mood, which had once been festive, was now tense and confusing. Jerry looked at me angrily and opened his mouth to yell, but my mother urged him to shut up after what he had the audacity to put me through. With a smirk, I told Ron that we should depart, and he nodded in accord. The audience erupted in a maelstrom of reactions, including disbelief, indignation, and whispered conversations. I left the venue with my head held high. The weight of betrayal was removed. The world had witnessed my anguish, resilience, and ability to rise above the ashes of a failed marriage. I don't care if people think I went too far because I've never slept with someone behind their back or ended a marriage. I only gave my stepsister a taste of her own medication. Update 3: I am astounded by everyone's response in just a few days since my previous update. I'm delighted to see that the majority of you understand why I did what I did, and I can appreciate some of your unfavorable emotions. Honestly, I have no regrets about what I did. My stepfather informed me that Jerry and Karen had formally ended their relationship. She refused to marry, no matter how hard Jerry begged with her. I'm guessing this suggests she still has feelings for Ron, and seeing him that day must have reminded her of them. I'm not one to take pleasure in the agony of others, but sometimes the only lessons individuals may learn are the repercussions. Jerry has sent me numerous angry missed calls and messages, but I have chosen to block him. My stepfather chastised me for what I did during my stepsister's wedding, and out of respect, I didn't argue with him much. My mother asked me to give him some time and space, and I agreed. In the aftermath, I've decided to focus on rebuilding my life and discovering happiness within myself. As I deal with the uncertainties of life, I will undoubtedly seek therapy, as everyone has suggested. For the time being, I want to focus on my personal development, finding my passions, and only exposing myself to positive influences. I discovered my husband had cheated with my best friend while I was working overseas at a baby shower they hosted for their unborn child. I returned from my work trip earlier than scheduled. I didn't tell anyone I was returning. I wanted to surprise Miguel. When I arrived on our street, I noticed a few automobiles parked in front of our house. The garden was adorned with blue and pink balloons, and a banner proclaimed, "Welcome our little miracle." I parked my car a block away and walked over. The door was slightly open, and music and laughter could be heard from inside. When I walked in, I froze in the center of the living room. Carmen, my dearest friend, was clearly 6 months pregnant. My mother-in-law, Rosa, was softly massaging her belly as my mother poured drinks. Gifts were arranged on a beautiful table. "So, is the nursery ready?" my Aunt Elena said. "Almost," Carmen responded. Miguel insisted on painting it himself. He's been working on it every weekend. My spouse strolled in at that very moment, bearing more drinks. He approached Carmen and hugged her from behind, his hands resting on her stomach. "We just need to set up the crib," he told us. "We picked it out together last week." I watched as my mother stiffened when she saw me. She hurried over. "Anna, we weren't expecting you today," she said softly, taking my arm. "Let's go outside. We need to talk." I pushed free from her grip. "Talk about what?" I inquired. "About how my husband got my best friend pregnant while I was working in another country." The buzz in the room subsided. Carmen was the first to notice me. Her face became pallid. Miguel stood motionless, his hands resting on her tummy. "Anna," he started. "Don't you dare," I interrupted him. "How long have you been cheating on me?" No one responded. My father, standing in a corner, was unable to look me in the eye. "I can explain," Carmen replied, taking a step forward. "We didn't want you to find out like this." "Oh. And how were you planning to tell me? After the baby was born? Or when they turned 18? My mother-in-law stepped in. "Anna, please think about the baby. Carmen doesn't need this stress in her condition." "Her condition?" I asked, laughing dryly. "The same condition I was in 2 years ago when I lost my baby. Where was your concern then, Rosa?" The hush that ensued was deafening. My mom tried again. "Honey, I know this is difficult." "Difficult for whom?" I demanded. "For me, who worked nonstop for 9 months while my husband was sleeping with my best friend. Or for all of you, who had to keep up the charade." Miguel eventually walked away from Carmen. "Anna, can we talk privately? Don't make a scene." "A scene?" I sneered. "No, Miguel. A scene would be telling everyone how you convinced me to take that overseas job. How you said we needed the money to start our family." I turned to face Carmen. "Did he tell you that? Or did he say he was lonely and abandoned while his cruel wife chased her career?" Carmen began crying. "It wasn't like that. We didn't plan this." "Of course not," I replied mockingly. "I suppose you just tripped and fell pregnant by my husband? These things happen, right?" The visitors started shifting uncomfortably. Some grabbed their bags and prepared to go. My father has finally spoken up. "Anna, calm down. You're upset. Upset? I laughed bitterly. No, Dad, I'm perfectly calm. In fact, I'm grateful. My mother frowned, puzzled. Grateful? She repeated. Yes, I said, my voice steady. Because now I see everyone for who they really are. My husband, the liar. My best friend, the traitor. And my family, the cowards who chose to protect this lie instead of me. I strolled over to the present stand and chose one at random. This one's yours, Mom, I said, holding it up. You bought a nice gift for your son-in-law's mistress's baby. Anna, please, my mother begged. I ripped the package paper open. The baby's attire was white with blue embellishments. How thoughtful, I replied, my voice full with sarcasm. I hope you kept the receipt. Miguel moved closer, attempting to take the gift from my hands. Enough, Anna, you're making a fool of yourself. Making a fool of myself? I snorted. No, Miguel, you did that all on your own, getting my best friend pregnant while I was paying all the bills. My mother-in-law stood up in indignation. This is too much, she exclaimed. Miguel was just looking for the happiness you couldn't give him. Always busy, always working? You're right, Rosa, I responded coldly. I was too busy working. Working to pay the mortgage on the house where your son was sleeping with my best friend. I gazed around the room. Every familiar face suddenly resembled that of a stranger. You know what? I said. You can keep the house, the furniture, the gifts. But, Miguel, I suggest you get a good job because you won't have access to my money anymore. Miguel's cheeks turned pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about how, while I was overseas, I wasn't just working, I was also consulting a lawyer. I have proof of every penny I spent on this house, on you, on our marriage. I turned and went out of the house, not looking back. My hands were trembling, my breathing was uneven, but I refused to give up in front of them. They did not deserve to see my tears. I went away, ignoring the curious eyes of the neighbors, who had most likely heard everything that had happened. I got in my car and slammed the door shut. My fingers grew white from the tight hold I had on the steering wheel. My vision had dimmed, but I refused to cry. I started the engine and drove away from that nightmare, with no destination or direction. My phone was full of messages. I missed calls from my mother. Miguel sent text messages. Even Carmen. Please, Anna, we need to talk. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. You don't understand the whole situation. Oh, I understand. I really understood. I realized that while I was working to support my home, family, and marriage, they were all together. Every time Miguel called and said he missed me, I knew he was telling a lie. I realized that whenever Carmen stated she was busy and couldn't talk, it was because she was busy with him. A nasty taste entered my mouth. Disgust. I'm disgusted with myself for not noticing it sooner. After driving for a time, I turned into the parking lot of an unrelated hotel. I needed someplace to breathe. I wasn't returning to that house. That house now served as a monument to my humiliation. I headed to the front desk and reserved a room for a few days. The receptionist gave me an odd look, possibly due to my untidy appearance, but handed me the key without asking any questions. When I entered the room, I shut the door and collapsed on the bed. Only then did the weight of everything overwhelm me. I curled up and hugged myself, letting the tears flow, tears of fury, disdain, and a deep, stifling agony that constricted my chest. But I couldn't do this forever. I needed to do something. The next morning, I went directly to my lawyer's office. He was already aware of my condition and had all of the essential documentation prepared to guarantee that I get out of this problem with as little damage as possible. I want to start the process today, I stated firmly. Divorce, property division, everything. And I want it to be clear that Miguel won't see a single cent of my money. He nodded. You have more than enough evidence to contest any claim he might make. The house is in your name, all the expenses were covered by you, he has no rights to anything. I took a deep breath. Good. Then let him find out the hard way. I walked out of the office with an unusual sensation of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt in charge of my own life. My phone vibrated. Miguel. I ignored it. Minutes later, a message appeared. We need to talk, please, Anna. I merely said, talk to my lawyer. Days passed, and the calls and messages continued. Until one afternoon, while I was drinking coffee at a cafe near the hotel, someone approached my table. Miguel. He looked terrible, deep eye bags, unkempt hair, but I had no pity. Anna, please. He sat across from me without being asked. I didn't want you to find out like that. I crossed my arms. Oh? But how did you want me to find out? With an invitation to the baby shower? He ran his palm over his face, tired. This isn't how I wanted things to happen. I made a mistake. A mistake? I scoffed. Getting my best friend pregnant was not a mistake, Miguel. It was a choice. You decided to sleep with her. You decided to lie to me. You opted to have everyone cover for you. He lowers his head. I was lonely, Anna. You were never here. You were always traveling, always busy with work. I gave out a sour laugh. And why was I busy, Miguel? Because I was the one paying for our damn house while you sat at home doing nothing. He said nothing. You want to know the most ironic part? I asked. I took that position because I believed we were creating something together, and I made sacrifices thinking it was for the greater good. But while I was straining myself to exhaustion, you were ripping off my dearest friend. He gazed at me with desperation. I know I messed up, Anna, but can't we fix this another way? I leaned forward and looked right into his eyes. We're correcting it. My lawyer has already filed for divorce. You will not receive a penny from me. And as for that child, I hope you are a decent father, because I want you out of my life. Anna, please. It's over, Miguel. I stood up and went away, not looking back. The news quickly spread. My true friends, those who had not deceived me, stood by my side. And my family? Oh, they attempted to contact out. My mother contacted me several times and tried to justify everything. We didn't want to hurt you, sweetheart. It was complicated for all of us. You need to forgive. Forgive? I moved on. I eventually rebuilt my life. I left the motel and got a new apartment. I concentrated on my profession and future. And Miguel? He quickly learned that life was not as easy without the comfort I had supplied. A few weeks later, I got another note. Can we talk? I miss you. I smiled and deleted the message without responding, and for the first time in a long time, I felt liberated. When I finally received word that Miguel had been legally served with the divorce papers, I knew his real misery had only begun. He attempted to reach me in every manner possible. He called me dozens of times each day. I've sent an unending number of messages. He even showed up at places I frequented. But I did not respond. I did not give him a chance. I refused to allow him to control me. One night, when I was returning to my apartment, I noticed my mother standing outside. Anna, we need to talk. I rolled my eyes. I already knew what it was about. We have nothing to talk about. Miguel is desperate. You're taking everything from him, she exclaimed, as if I were the antagonist in this scenario. I crossed my arms. Oh, now he's the victim? Honey, he made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you should ruin his life, my mom replied. I laughed without humor. He ruined my life, Mom. He cheated on me, got my best friend pregnant, and all of you covered for them. And now you have the nerve to tell me that I'm being cruel. She groaned and reached for my hand, but I pulled away. What you're doing to him? This isn't right, Anna. Anger flared in my chest. Oh, you want to talk about what's right? I snapped at you. Was it right for me to pay the mortgage alone while he was screwing my best friend? Was it right that I worked my ass off while he played the perfect husband? Now, he gets to deal with the consequences. She looked at me as though I were a monster. He has nowhere to go, she muttered. I shrugged. Not my problem. She shook her head, disbelieving. I didn't raise you to be this way, Anna. And I didn't expect my own mother to take the side of a cheating bastard. I turned around and walked into my building, not looking back. Days passed, and Miguel's plight only worsened. Since I had paid for everything, he was now drowning in bills. The mortgage payments were past due, and without my money, he swiftly fell into financial despair. Then came the eviction. I knew it was coming when I got confirmation that he hadn't made any payments. And I made it a point to personally see the moment he was forced to leave my house. When I arrived, the place was in disarray. Boxes were spread over the front yard. Miguel was disputing with the eviction officer. Carmen stood behind him, gripping her pregnant tummy with a terrified gaze. Anna, he said when he spotted me. You can't do this to me. I crossed my arms, feeling a dark sensation of contentment grow within me. I can, and I did. This isn't fair. I lived in this house. No, I replied coldly. I paid for this house. You were just a parasite living in it. His face flushed red with frustration. Where the hell do you expect me to go? I shrugged. Not my problem. Carmen gazed at me with desperation in her eyes. Anna, please, please. She had the audacity to look me in the eyes and say please. I took a step towards her. Oh, so now you can say my name? Before it was just, I hope she never finds out, wasn't it? She lowers her head. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But it is. And now, you and Miguel have to deal with it. Miguel rubbed his hands across his face, appearing weary. You don't have a heart, he mumbled. I tilted my head. Funny, because you sure loved that heart when it was paying all your bills. He opened his mouth to argue, but then closed it again when the officer approached. Time's up. You need to vacate the property now. Miguel's expression changed to one of utter terror. He looked around and realized he was out of options. He grabbed a box and banged it on the ground. You just want to see me destroyed, don't you? I leaned in closer, meeting his stare without pity. Yes. He clenched his jaw and marched out, Carmen trailing behind him. I stood there, watching him leave, broken, homeless, and powerless. Over the next few days, my entire family turned against me. My aunts called me. My mother arrived at my apartment again. Even my father, who normally remained out of things, attempted to intercede. Anna, he's sleeping on your mother-in-law's couch. Don't you think this has gone too far? No, Dad, I don't. Carmen is pregnant, they have nothing? Great, I remarked, my voice full of sarcasm. Then Miguel can finally do what he should have done a long time ago. Get a job. My mother threw up her hands, exasperated. You're obsessed with revenge. And you're obsessed with protecting a cheater. They couldn't change my mind. And Miguel? Oh, Miguel was in ruins. There is no home. There's no comfort. He no longer had access to the money he had been stealing from me for years. I heard from some mutual friends that he had started working odd jobs to make ends meet, but it wasn't enough. And then the unavoidable occurred. Miguel walked up to my apartment. He appeared unhappy, thinner, with black circles beneath his eyes. Anna, please, I have nothing left, he said. I stared at him. I know I need help. I inclined my head and pretended to think. Like I needed help when I found out you were cheating on me? He closed his eyes, annoyed. I was an idiot. I know that. But I can't change the past. I crossed my arms. No, but you sure as hell can suffer in the present. His palms tightened into fists as he swallowed his pride. You don't have to be this cruel. Oh, but I do, I replied, my tone mocking. I learned from the best. With that, I slammed the door in his face. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. Miguel was now discovering what life was like without me. And me? I was finally free. Miguel sunk deeper, exactly as I predicted. There is no home, no money. There's no comfort. He had transformed from a privileged, dependent husband to a desperate man who hopped from job to job simply to stay afloat. And me? I moved on. I did not feel sorry for him. In fact, every time I heard of another calamity in his life, I felt a strange kind of joy. It was a great taste of justice to know that all he had done to me would come back to haunt him. And then I got the finest news I'd had in months. Carmen has filed for divorce. I discovered it from an acquaintance, one of the few people who still dared to speak with me after everything had transpired. She ran into me in a cafe, paused for a bit, and smiled slightly before dropping the bombshell. She left him. I blinked. What? Carmen. She filed for divorce. And she wants alimony. I couldn't stop myself from laughing, and it was a big, true laugh from the core. Are you serious? I said, still chuckling. Dead serious. Miguel can't hold a stable job, and she doesn't want to be the one supporting him. Oh, the irony was great. Carmen had swore Miguel was her genuine love. I worked hard to support him, but he clung to me like a parasite. I had now done the same thing to him as he had to me. I left him when he was no longer useful. And she wants alimony? I inquired, still beaming. Yeah. She claims he promised to take care of her, and now that she has a baby, she needs financial support. I couldn't stop laughing. Please tell me, I responded, chuckling. Does Miguel even have money to pay her? My acquaintance smirked. No. I lost it. Miguel hadn't simply lost everything I'd given him, now, even the lady he betrayed me for was financially ruining him. Karma had come for him. And this time, he had no one left to leech from. I had to see it. The following week, I made an unintentional appearance at a location I knew Miguel still frequented, a dingy bar where we used to hang out. One of the few places he could still afford. He was sitting at the counter, resembling a ghost of his old self. Thinner. Dark rings appeared under his eyes. His beard is untidy. Of course, he was holding a cheap beer. I strolled in gently and took my time, then sat 2 seats away. He quickly noticed me. His expression hardened. What do you want? He asked quietly, his voice raspy and exhausted. Nothing, I replied, picking up my own drink. Just enjoying the view. He breathed deeply. Are you happy now? I sipped, enjoying the moment. Yes, very. He scoffed and shook his head. You think this is funny? Miguel, I find this hilarious. You abandoned our marriage for Carmen, and look where you are today. She left you and took what little you had left. He ran a hand over his face, obviously fatigued. You don't understand. Oh, I understand completely. Tell me how your great love fell apart so swiftly. He remained silent for a long time before glancing at his empty glass. She said she couldn't be with someone who had nothing to offer. I grinned. Funny, right? That's exactly what you said about me. He closed his eyes, his jaw stiffening. You don't get it, Anna. Oh, I do. You were only suitable for her when it was convenient. Now that you can't provide the comfortable life she desired, she threw you away like junk. He did not argue, because he could not. I rose up, prepared to depart. You know what's the best part? I asked, staring down at him. You deserve every bit of this. And I walked away, leaving Miguel to drown in his own despair. Following that day, I cut off all ties to my past. I alienated myself from my family. The hypocritical aunts who often told me to forgive. My mother insisted that I had gone too far. I owed nothing to any of them. I only owed myself. So I started afresh. I completely reconstructed my life. I bought a new apartment exclusively for myself. I sold everything that reminded me of that miserable period in my life. I donated some items. Others were burned. Miguel and Carmen were eliminated. I went out more. I met new folks. I enjoyed life without carrying dead weight on my back. For the first time in years, I had control over my life. And as I moved forward, Miguel kept falling apart. Months later, I learned that he had attempted to appeal the divorce decision, arguing that he deserved alimony instead. Of course, the judge laughed at him and refused everything. I also discovered that Carmen continued to drain what little money he had left. And me, I have never felt better. The world was finally as it should be. I was free. And Miguel was receiving just what he deserved. My sister betrayed me after I took her in, having an affair with my husband, getting pregnant, and demanding I leave so they could start a family. I'm 34 years old, and a few months ago, I allowed my sister, Julie, 28, to move in with me because she was in a bad financial situation. Julie lost her work when her firm closed, and 2 weeks later, she became gravely ill with West Nile virus. After discussing it with my parents, I agreed she could move in with me for a few weeks so I could care for her, monitor her recovery, and help her save money on rent because it was evident she wouldn't be able to work again soon. She was at rock bottom, and I was the one who stepped up to help her because our parents live far away and she does not have many friends who can support her. I believed it was the appropriate thing to do, assist a family member or friend in need. But how did she compensate me? By engaging in an affair with my husband. On top of that, she had the audacity to tell me that I should leave so they could start their happy family, because she is now pregnant. This all came to light a few days back. Julie invited my husband and me to sit down because she had something important to say. I believed she was finally going to move out after recovering well in recent weeks. I imagined she was going to proclaim that she was ready to return to work and leave our life. Instead, she revealed that she and my husband had been having an affair for the past few weeks, and she was now pregnant. When I looked at my husband, I could see he was just as shocked as I was. Julie had clearly not discussed it with him before telling me. That explains a lot. After admitting she was pregnant with my husband's child, she apologized for what had transpired and said she knew how surprised I was. But she said, "What's done is done, and the past can't be changed." She then had the arrogance to ask me to leave the house since she would be uncomfortable around me in her current state. I was furious, but I remained calm. I discreetly assured her that I wasn't leaving because the house was mine. If anyone had to leave, it would be her, and she could take my unfaithful husband with her. They could have their happy family anywhere they wanted since I was going to file for divorce and did not want to see one of them again. I spoke as quietly as I could, trying to keep my wrath under control and handle the matter with dignity. They had already surprised me, so I was not going to let them see me lose control. When I told her this was my property and I was not leaving, she thought I was joking. But then my spouse stepped in and confirmed that I was not joking. He explained that he owned nothing, which surprised Julie. He had apparently lied to her about everything. For reference, my husband and I have been together for 8 years and married for the past 5. A few months after our wedding, I took a gamble and launched my own business. Fortunately, It did quite well, so my husband and I decided he could stay at home and pursue writing full-time, a passion he has always enjoyed. For the past 4 years, he's been working on his big novel while doing housework. We didn't have children, so there wasn't much to do. The house and everything in it belonged to me because I purchased them, and we both agreed that owning everything made sense. I bet he regrets it now. When my husband acknowledged to Julie that he didn't own anything and had lied, she lost it. She began ranting at him, calling him a phony and a liar, and claiming she had been duped. It was pleasant to see her lose her cool with him, but I was unconcerned about their conflict. I just wanted them out of my house. I had to intercede and tell them to stop yelling at each other because I wanted them to go right away. I didn't give them much time to pack, I simply wanted them out of my sight. To his credit, my spouse understood he couldn't persuade himself out of this. He understood how much I treasured my self-esteem and dignity, and he knew I'd never forgive adultery. So he discreetly walked into our bedroom and began packing. Julie, on the other hand, dropped on her knees and begged me for forgiveness. She stated she'd do everything to correct it, but she needed a place to live and couldn't be evicted, especially since she was pregnant with my nephew. The mention of family infuriated me. I grabbed her arm, yanked her up, and pushed her out the door. I was tough, but I didn't care. I was infuriated. I was furious that she dared to call us family after sleeping with my husband. She continued to wail and beg on the porch, but I closed the door. Then I went to the guest room and hurriedly put all of her belongings into her luggage before throwing them outside. I warned her to leave or I'd contact the cops. She kept crying, but I simply slammed the door and returned inside. A few minutes later, my husband emerged with his baggage and apologized sincerely. I pretended to not hear him. Julie screamed and begged on the porch for approximately an hour after he departed, but I turned on my headphones and ignored her. I eventually sensed the silence, and realized she had finally departed. That night, I called my lawyer, explained everything, and stated that I intended to file for divorce. I had planned to notify my family and friends later, but my dad called the next day. They thought what I had done was terrible. They accused me of being unkind and inconsiderate to Julie, who had recently been through a lot. I found this unusual because my parents had always treated all of us equally. It wasn't like Julie was their favorite. But when they started defending her, something didn't feel right with me. They informed me that they knew she was pregnant and that I couldn't kick her out of the house in that condition, especially because she was between jobs and recovering from a terrible illness. They told her it would take some time to get back on her feet. And, anyway, she didn't have anyone else who could take care of her like I could. Her friends were coping with their own money problems, jobs, and families, so they couldn't care for her. My parents insisted that as her sister, the least I could do was forgive her ignorance and be there for her. Furthermore, they reminded me that my husband had seduced her, not the other way around. They claimed he told her that he was in charge of our finances and a prominent novelist and screenwriter. He reportedly did not want celebrity, thus he remained incognito. My sister, being naive, believed everything and thought he was important. That's why she believed his falsehoods. But then things got worse. She claimed she was having an affair with him and believed they could drive me out of the house together. Unfortunately for them, their scheme failed. Especially because they had not even synchronized their stories. When she admitted everything, she wrecked it for both of them. So I stood my ground. I looked her in the eye and said, "What sister? I don't have a sister." Then I argued that I had every right to kick her out because she chose to betray me and my husband. It didn't matter if he played a role. They both opted to stab me in the back. It made no sense to kick him out and let her stay as if nothing had occurred. I didn't care if she was pregnant or unemployed. I had previously weighed those concerns before allowing her to stay with me for months. How did she compensate me? By having an affair with my spouse inside my own home. Besides, it's not like she was significantly pregnant and unable to cope on her own. She was barely a couple of weeks along. Even if she was 9 months pregnant, I would have kicked her out. What she did was awful. She was ready to throw me out because she thought the house belonged to my husband, so I consider it poetic justice. But my parents insisted I was being too tough. They focused on how I handled the matter rather than what she did. I was bored of hearing the same arguments, so I hung up. Since then, we have not spoken. Do you believe I was wrong to kick my pregnant sister out of my home? Update 1. I understand that some people think forcing a pregnant lady out of my house is wrong, but keeping her under my roof after what she did would be insanity. Fortunately, most people agree I was correct and believe she should find another place to stay. Yesterday I blocked my parents. This scenario has taken a significant emotional toll on me, but I am unable to stop working. I'm the boss, therefore I have to have a tough demeanor at work. It's business as usual, but when I return home, I completely broke down. The emotional pain is overwhelming. A few days ago, my lawyer and I filed for divorce. My husband will be served soon, and I doubt he will oppose it. He knows me well enough to know I will not let him off the hook if he tries. But, even though I am sure of my decision, it still aches. Winning the divorce will not magically make things better. I can't believe that after 8 years together, he'd betray me, with my own sister. I truly believed we were in love, that we would grow old together. Now I'm questioning everything we've ever had. Perhaps this was not his first affair. Perhaps this is not his first arrest. The thought of that tears my heart. But all I can do now is accept it and try to go on. He is the only one that has not attempted to contact me since I kicked him out. My parents and Julie have tried, but only to persuade me to let her stay again for free. My folks are taking her side, which is absurd. In my initial post, I mentioned that my parents always treated Julie and me equally. Now, I'm not too sure. I never had big expectations for Julie. We weren't best friends, but our friendship wasn't horrible. That is why I agreed to help her and allow her to stay with me. We had an extra room, and I thought, why not? My parents also supported it, and I assume that's what families do. But I didn't expect her to betray me like this. It hurts when someone you've been assisting for months stabs you in the back. Acceptance is even more difficult with my parents. They have always been reasonable and fair, so I anticipated them to be furious with Julie. To be fair, they were. Our chats made it plain that they disapproved of her activities, but they insisted that the damage is done, and now we need to move on. I'm not sure what's gotten into them, but I'm quite disappointed. I feel like I've lost all respect for them, and I'm not sure if it will ever be recovered. I'm emotionally drained. Mentally, I'm just focused on work because my personal life has completely collapsed. I haven't even informed my pals what's going on, but I know I'll have to eventually. My spouse and I have many shared acquaintances, and I'd rather they heard the truth from me than what he says. At this point, I'm not sure what to expect from anyone. Currently, I'm focusing 2 things. Ensure that my work does not suffer. Handling the divorce. I'm fairly positive my hubby won't object. I've been fair with the terms, but there's always the possibility of the unexpected, so I'm gathering the essential papers just in case. Aside from that, I'm attempting to keep my thoughts as clear as possible. The last thing I want is to spin out of control. Sharing my feelings here has been quite beneficial. I really thank everyone who has reached out, commented, and offered support. It means more to me than you realize. Update 2. My spouse, as I had predicted, did not dispute the divorce. He texted me to confirm that the terms were fair. In another message, he stated that he had been thinking about how to apologize to me but couldn't come up with anything that didn't sound weak or dishonest. So, he decided to simply say it. He is sorry. He admitted that he lied to Julie to impress her because he felt inadequate. He felt purposeless because he didn't own anything, was financially dependent on me, and didn't have any children. His novel was not progressing, and he felt as if he had squandered 4 years on something pointless. That irritation led to sadness, but he couldn't accept it. To himself, let alone to me. Then Julie arrived. Without considering how wicked it was, he began lying to her to inflate his ego. He claimed to be in charge of our finances and successful in his work. Eventually, they slept together. He expected it to be a one-time error, but it spun out of control. Despite his guilt, he could not stop. It became his technique of avoiding all that was wrong in his life. When Julie became pregnant and we had our argument, everything fell apart. He said he truly regretted everything. He admits he wrecked what we had, but he claimed it was the first and last time he cheated. He implored me to believe him, hoping that one day I would forgive him. I cried after reading that message. It was another reminder of what I had lost. I felt I knew this man. That we had a solid connection based on love. But everything fell apart in one day. Losing that trust is painful, and I know everyone who has experienced divorce or betrayal understands how I feel. A part of me wanted to detest him. To concentrate on all the bad things he has done. However, it still hurts. I hated myself for crying at his message. But after I finished, I gained enough strength to block him. I didn't respond. He did not deserve a response, especially now, when everything was so raw. After a while, I became even upset over what he had said. All he needed to do was talk to me. I never made him feel bad for staying at home and working on his novel. I'm not a really creative person, I've never been interested in writing or anything like that. Except now, I suppose, because I need to get this off my chest. But I admired his artistic side. I saw nothing wrong with him staying at home. Perhaps his weak masculine ego couldn't withstand it. Perhaps other people made comments that made him bitter. But after 8 years together, He could have at least told me what was going on. We married because we wanted to support each other, and I would have been there for him. Maybe we could have worked things out together, but he decided not to. He relied on Julie instead, which is how we ended up in this predicament. The more I think about it, the more horrible and tragic it appears. He lied about so many things to make himself look bigger and better. It is pathetic. I loved him for who he was, but it wasn't enough for him. This will never make sense to me. At least with Julie, I understand her motivation. She desired my life without making any effort. She felt she could accomplish this by becoming pregnant and moving in with my so-called wealthy spouse. But now, I can just choose to ignore her existence. In a few months, I'll be finished with the divorce, and I won't have to see or worry about him again. Update 3. It's been a few days since my last update, and I've enjoyed some tranquil days. But this morning, my folks arrived at my residence. It was unusual because they had rarely visited my father's hometown since moving there to oversee the family business with my uncle. Usually, Julie and I had to go see them. The fact that they flew to see me indicated something significant. But I knew they were just here to chat about Julie. So, as I opened the door, I informed them directly. If they came here to talk about her, I didn't want to hear it. There's only one Sunday a week, and I wasn't going to waste it rehashing the same theme. I had said what I needed to say, and there was nothing further to talk. I made it clear, they could only come in if they apologized to me first. They had two options. Apologize, leave. I set very clear boundaries. My parents, however, insisted that they had come particularly to discuss Julie. They stated that we needed to discuss this since the way I was treating her and them was not appropriate. To them, we were family, and families deal with things differently. Once again, they began with the family angle. And, like with Julie, I lost my tolerance. This is not how families treat one another. At least not in the type of family I'd like to have. I will offer them this. In this family, we approach things differently. My sister sleeps with my husband, and I kick her out of the house. That is obviously different from most families. I lay everything out for them. They tried to stutter and argue, but I didn't let them. I rushed through everything they could have said. By the end, my mother was in tears. But they were on my land, and I could talk to them as I pleased. Especially since they decided to trouble me this morning. The entire conversation should have been addressed to Julie, the person who truly did something wrong. Not me. After I finished ranting, my mother was sobbing so hard that my father informed me he never wanted to communicate with me again. He called me a terrible daughter for making my own mother cry, the lady who gave me life. But I don't care. They can call me insane if they want. I know I am not, and that is sufficient for me. If anyone is insane, it is them. Or my sister. And honestly, perhaps all three of them. Update 4. It's been a month since I last updated. I haven't contacted anyone in my family, including Julie, and especially not my parents. I just know that they've been sending her money. According to several others, my soon-to-be ex-husband is currently living with his parents. He intends to relocate to another state after his divorce is finalized. Before you ask, I have no idea what he intends to do about his child. Most of our friends now have a clear understanding of what happened. The majority have begun to cut him out of their life. A few people are trying to remain impartial and avoid becoming engaged. As for me, my life is slowly but steadily getting back on track. I'll do whatever it takes to keep my peace now. I'm not exactly joyful yet, but I'm peaceful, which is a significant improvement over last month. Little by little, I know I'll be happy again. Following all, bad things seldom last forever. Update 5. This update is very recent since some new developments have occurred that you may be interested in learning about. My sister lost the baby and blamed me for it. According to her, the stress I produced led to her miscarriage. My parents are also on this mission with her. The bright side is that they don't annoy me directly. This is all coming from neutral folks who claim they are not taking sides but nonetheless accuse me of killing a baby out of pride. It's funny, though, because none of these folks have welcomed my sister into their houses. So, by their logic, they're equally culpable as I am. If my sister was concerned about her pregnancy, she should not have slept with someone else's husband, particularly her sister's. At the very least, she should have used protection. Nothing in this circumstance is normal. But when people make such illogical allegations, it isn't worth my time or energy. Update 6. My ex-husband contacted me a few hours ago, and you will not believe what he said. No, he did not beg me to return. We didn't end on such bad terms, which is why I reacted. He admitted he was wrong and, to his credit, made the divorce procedure simple. I don't harbor grudges against him, not because he deserves them, but because I don't want to waste my time being angry or thinking about him. No cheater is worth it. What he told me, however, was quite interesting. He confirmed that my sister had never been pregnant. He called to let me know since he had heard everything stated about me and wanted me to know the truth. He told them the same thing. Apparently, he'd been pressing her for proof of her pregnancy and even volunteered to accompany her to a doctor's appointment multiple times. She constantly avoided it. She eventually announced that she had lost the baby. When he asked for evidence, she didn't have any. He spoke with my parents, who also had no proof. There is no record of her becoming pregnant or losing the baby. She simply chose one day to inform everyone that she had miscarried, and that was it. So now, all of the claims against me for causing her to lose the baby are meaningless. My parents have attempted to contact me to reconcile, and they have even ceased financially supporting her now that they know they will not be grandparents. But really? It is too little, too late. I don't care what they do to my sister anymore. When I was betrayed, all I needed was their support, the kind that any moral parent would give a child in my situation. So, no. It's a no for them too. In conclusion, my sister lost a brother, a home, and my assistance because she decided to sleep with my husband and fake a pregnancy. My parents lost a daughter because they chose lies over the truth. I think the three of them should go to Vegas and try their luck. Perhaps gaming will be better for them than family. I saved $140,000 for my dream wedding, but my parents lied about a medical emergency and used it all to fund my brother's lavish honeymoon. Hello, so I, 26F, recently married my hubby, 26M, following a 6-year romance. We arranged a private ceremony at his aunt's farmhouse, which was not what we had intended at first. I had wanted to marry on the beach because it was where we had some of our happiest moments. My husband and I are both water lovers, and we would go to the beach at least once a month to relax and decompress. So it is a particular place for us. I had already begun searching for places where we could all stay. Like every other bride on the planet, I wanted my wedding to be memorable. I had been saving for a big celebration for the past 5 years. I work in advertising and make a decent living. However, my husband and I live cheaply and tried to save money for the future. We had planned to hire one of the top hotels with a sea view so that our guests could have a great experience. It was supposed to be a luxury experience, but we had to adjust our plans and cut back significantly because my parents decided to borrow money from me a few months ago. I could not force myself to decline. Some context. My brother, 24 million, got married a few months ago. However, his wedding was unexpected, and they had little time to plan. He had been with his wife for roughly 2 years and proposed about a month before they married. It was a tiny ceremony with only family and a few friends. But I was thrilled for him because it was their wedding and their decision. However, a few weeks after his wedding, my mother contacted me and requested that I borrow $125,000. She told me that my father had suddenly become ill. She claimed it was probably his diabetes acting up again, but she couldn't afford all of the medical bills alone and needed my assistance. She stated that the doctors had recommended a specialized medicine, but it was too expensive because it had to be imported. Their insurance wouldn't cover it, and she couldn't afford it. I was quite concerned about my father's health, so I decided to stand up and lend her the money, no questions asked. The lies begin. I visited them a few times and begged my mother to show me the medical papers, but she always managed to avoid my questions. When I visited, my father was always in bed. However, for some reason, he did not appear to be really sick. Even when I asked my mother why he hadn't been taken to a hospital for observation and expert treatment, she said it wasn't required just now. But he was unwell enough to require an unusual prescription that wasn't even manufactured here and wasn't covered by their insurance. I am not an idiot. After the first few encounters, I realized there was something strange going on with my folks. But I didn't want to accuse them of anything until I was really certain. It would be a bad image if I accused them of lying about a medical emergency in order to borrow money, only to find out later that it was real. The big revelation. I quickly discovered that my brother had not been visiting our parents. Even when I asked why, my father said they didn't want him to worry. Because he was so young, they wanted him to concentrate on his work. They were absolutely cool with me being worried sick. After a few weeks had gone and my brother had not visited, I decided to phone him. I asked when he was going to stop by to see our father. That's when he casually mentioned that he'd pay me a visit as soon as he returned from his honeymoon. That was news to me. I had no idea he had left for his honeymoon because my parents had not informed me. I had no idea where he was because neither he nor his wife had posted anything about it on social media. When I inquired why he hadn't told me, he explained that he had planned to surprise everyone by returning after a month away with a collection of images, tales, and recollections from their tour around Europe. He stated that he had no intention of notifying me, but he was concerned when I mentioned that our father was sick, so he felt compelled to respond. He told me that after receiving my concerned text, he spoke with our parents, who assured him that there was nothing to worry about and that they were okay. He explained that our parents had most likely exaggerated the scenario while talking to me, and I had believed them because I was neurotic, resulting in a misunderstanding. I tried to give my parents the benefit of the doubt, believing that they had been keeping the truth from my brother because they didn't want to ruin his honeymoon or make him worry about them. I knew what I had seen in my parents' house, and there was no room for misunderstanding. But then my brother told me that if what I had predicted about Dad being terribly sick had come true, he would have felt terrible about not being there for him. Apparently, our parents paid for his excessively expensive and lengthy honeymoon. All of the danger bells went up in my head, so I asked him how much this trip would cost him. Then he told me that this trip would cost our parents at least $135,000 because he and his wife were going all out for their honeymoon, staying in the most costly hotels and eating at the best restaurants, because they could only do it once. They would also be shopping for a lot of things, and our parents would cover the cost. I realized right away that this was where my money was going and there was no medical emergency at all. There had never been an emergency, so they had no documentation to show me and had never even been to the hospital. My parents had merely made up the entire narrative in order to raise funds for my brother's honeymoon, which was meant to be their wedding gift. I felt incredibly insulted hearing my brother speak about how our parents went above and beyond for him just so the two of them could enjoy their honeymoon because they hadn't been able to have a lavish wedding. The money I had lent to my parents came from my wedding fund, and I felt as if I had been stabbed in the back when I discovered that my parents had handed it all to my brother. When I challenged them after that phone call, my parents informed me that they had to make up a tale because they knew I would not give them the money if I knew it would be spent for my brother's honeymoon. They told me he had been suffering at work and feeling unhappy for a long time, so they wanted him to have some fun without worrying about money. Unfortunately, they were unable to fund it themselves because it would jeopardize their own retirement fund, so they had to borrow money from me. Their reasoning was that I was still young and earning, and I had many years ahead of me to work and recoup this money, but it was not the same for them. They also stated that it was merely money, which they will refund at some point. But, for the time being, I needed to put myself second and consider my brother's sentiments, as this honeymoon appeared to have reinvigorated him and saved him from depression. I couldn't believe it, because it meant I'd have to cut back on my wedding spending for no apparent reason. To be clear, I was fine with having a smaller wedding if it meant my father's health didn't suffer. But this was not what I had signed up for. I was upset when they told me the truth, and I demanded that they repay me before I married because I intended to use the money for my wedding. I had a lot of expenses to consider if I wanted to go forward with a beach wedding. Even though my husband and his family were covering part of the expenses, I needed to look after myself as well. My parents had never planned to pay for the wedding since they had informed me very early on that they could either pay for my college education or pay for when I married, but not both. I had planned to go to college and pay for my own wedding, so I had been saving up for it alone. In case any of you are wondering, when my brother entered college, I asked him whether my parents had forced him to choose between these two as well, and he laughed in my face as if it was the most absurd concept ever. I never brought it up with my parents because I didn't want to accuse them of having a favorite, even though it was obvious that they did. But I was young and still needed their assistance because I couldn't find work at the time. So bringing these issues up and battling with them will simply exacerbate the situation for me. It didn't make sense to confront them about this. However, it came out several years later when I confronted them about the money they had stolen from me and how they had always preferred my brother over me. They attempted to deny it, but it was as obvious as day. I told them they had to repay me because I was not going to give up my ideal wedding just because my brother was struggling at work. My parents could mollycoddle him by sending him on an extravagant vacation with their own money, but I hadn't worked hard for 5 years and saved enough for my wedding simply to have that amount taken away from me and given to my brother. But they told me that they couldn't refund the money to me all at once before the wedding, and that it would take them a few years to do so. They expected me to be fine with it since, evidently, nothing is more important than family. If I was willing to spend that money on a medical emergency for my father, there was no reason why I couldn't use it to save my brother from falling into depression. But here's the thing, my brother would never be depressed because of his job, since he never took it seriously, which is why he was awful at it and earned so little. He works in sales, and practically all of his money comes from commissions. So, if he's bad at what he does, he only has himself to blame. He might have been upset about it, but I can assure you that he was never going to get despondent. He simply didn't care enough about anything because he had been spoiled by my parents his entire life and was unaccustomed to working hard for things, which is why he appeared dissatisfied with his job. That's all it was. However, my parents exaggerated the situation to make it appear that he was worried by his work failures and needed to be rescued. It was all a bunch of nonsense. I attempted to tell my parents how important this wedding was to me. I had previously promised my husband and his family that I would cover certain expenses, which would be difficult if I didn't have the money, therefore they needed to take action. But they said they couldn't refund the money to me before I got married, so I'd have to scale back or ask my spouse and his family for help. It got to the point where I begged them to return my money. But all they did was shake their heads and say no, promising to return it someday but not before the wedding. I left their house crying, and when I returned home and informed my husband what had happened, he was just as angry and even more unhappy as I was. He was planning to contact a lawyer, but I told him there was no point because there was no written confirmation that my mother wanted the money for medical reasons or that she intended to return it to me. It had all been informal, with no binding contracts or documentation to substantiate a single point. So, even if we did file a case against her, we would be wasting more of our money by hiring for a lawyer because we would most likely be unable to establish anything because we did not have any messages in our favor. Everything had been verbal and off the record, so as much as we wanted to pursue my parents, we decided against it because it would be fruitless, and we didn't want to waste any more of our money on a hopeless scenario. Instead, we decided to start thinking about how we would adjust our wedding plans. Thankfully, my husband's family stepped in when they discovered what my parents had done. His aunt agreed to let us use her farmhouse venue for free. We'd always wanted to have a beach wedding, but his aunt hadn't recommended it at first. But now that we're looking at other options, she offered that idea, and I decided to check it out. My husband had visited the location before, but the moment I walked in, I knew it was the one. It was a wonderful location, and even though it was not near the ocean, my husband and I were delighted. His aunt was allowing us to use the venue for free, which gave us even more motivation to start planning around the farmhouse instead. I became preoccupied with wedding preparations, which gave me yet another reason to distance myself from my parents. I had already decided that they were not going to be invited to my wedding. But I was on the fence regarding my brother because he hadn't done anything wrong and didn't realize my parents had taken the money from me to give it to him. However, he made the decision much simpler for me by calling me after he returned from his honeymoon and berating me for humiliating our parents by requesting that they return my money. He told me that he had heard what had happened from our mother and was angry that I was being so difficult about it. Apparently, he thought this was no great thing, despite the fact that he had spent my money, and promised to return it to me as soon as he could. But I had to suck it up before the wedding and scale back. So that's when I decided how I felt about him, and I didn't speak to any of them after that. Now that I didn't have the complete wedding fund, I couldn't afford a lavish, extravagant wedding. To be honest, I believe it worked for me because the wedding I did have was far more lovely than anything I had envisioned previously. We had to reduce our expectations, but it was worthwhile since we realized that this day was supposed to be about us. We were not the individuals we were attempting to portray in our daily lives, so spending a fortune on a big wedding solely to impress people would be incredibly shallow. We decided to cut the wedding costs and instead do something better with the money we saved. In a way, I'm grateful for how things turned out since my wedding was still lovely and wonderful, but it lacked the pomp and show that I had envisioned previously. It was a good thing since we were only surrounded by people we loved and who loved us when we came together to celebrate. I believe that is pretty much all you need for a wedding, so I'm pleased with how things turned out. I posted images from my wedding a few days ago. Everyone in my family who had been invited to the wedding had been given strong and precise instructions to ensure that my parents and brother did not find out that the invites had already been sent. If they found out, they'd throw a fit since they didn't get one, which is how we were able to have a private ceremony without them coming up or attempting to coerce me into inviting them before the wedding. But now that it was finished and everything had gone smoothly, I didn't see anything wrong with sharing the images on social media. However, they discovered it and contacted me the next day, demanding an explanation for why they had not been invited to my wedding. I was surprised that they expected to be invited, given that my previous conversation with any of them had not been good. I had been crying as I left my parents' house after our previous quarrel, and we hadn't spoken since. The last time I spoke with my brother, he made me feel like everything was my fault and that I was the one who was being theatrical. After that, I hadn't spoken to any of them, and they hadn't attempted to speak with me either. So I wasn't sure why they had expected to be welcomed. They had not only expected me to invite them, but they were also disappointed that they were unable to attend the wedding. My parents called me first, then joined my brother to the call so they could all yell at me at the same time. But I didn't like it, and it seemed extremely entitled of them. I'd already cut them out of my life, and I didn't need any more turmoil while trying to enjoy my new life as a bride. So I told them that after they took my money, I needed to lower the wedding budget. I decided to invite only family and a few close friends, and because they were neither, they were not included. After that, I hung up and blocked them, hoping they would leave me alone. But an hour later, my husband told me that my brother had contacted him to notify us that my parents had been deeply offended by what I had said. My mother was upset, so she kept crying until she almost fainted. That was all he said, but I began to feel guilty because I hadn't meant to offend my parents so deeply. He could be bluffing, but I'm not sure, and hearing this has made me feel strangely bad. AITA for not inviting my parents and brother to my wedding after they stole money from my wedding fund. Update 1. Hello, it's been a week since my last chat with my parents and brother, and I've chosen not to speak to them again. My mother can cry all she wants, but it won't change the facts. I was crying so hard the day I confronted them about the money, and I even begged them to return it to me before the wedding, but they didn't seem to care. They had taken it quite lightly, and now I was going to do the same to them. You reap what you sow. I also warned my brother not to contact me or my husband, particularly my husband, because he had nothing to do with any of this, and I didn't want my family bothering him with their petty antics. I banned him again after that text since I didn't want my family to have any contact with me. They had mistreated me my entire life, and now I was not going to take it anymore. I vowed that if I could, I would file a lawsuit against them to recover my money. However, given the lack of actual evidence, that may be a long shot at the moment. My husband feels it's worth a shot and might just work, so we've been thinking about it. He has spoken with a reputable lawyer, and we will decide what to do in a few days. Until then, I just need to figure out how to get them to confess or admit that they borrowed the money from me under the pretense of using it for a medical emergency, but then gave it to my brother so he could have a fun honeymoon. It will be difficult to prove in court, but I refuse to let them off the hook so easy. I deserve to have my money returned to me, and I will do everything it takes to ensure that they do, and that they do it as soon as possible. Update 2. Yesterday, I warned my brother not to worry my husband with our family drama, so he apparently interpreted it as a sign to pull him into this, despite the fact that he is not involved. After we arrived home from work, my husband informed me that my parents and brother had sent him a slew of SMS, demanding that he speak with me and instruct me to unblock them. When he blocked them, they decided to escalate the situation by showing up at his workplace. Apparently, they had been waiting for him outside, and as soon as they saw his car go, they began tailing him and honking at him. So he had to stop and wait for them to catch up because he recognized my brother's car and knew it was them. He also knew that if he didn't stop and wait for them, they'd just follow him home, which would greatly disturb me. So he decided to take one for the team and indulge their nonsense. When he pulled over, my brother exited his car, approached his window, and stated that they wanted to meet with him in person. There was a diner nearby, and my spouse was eager to get it over with. They took a booth in the diner so that my family could express whatever they felt was so vital. My brother informed him that he didn't think it was fair for me to cut everyone off over money, and that it was an overreaction. They also thought my implication that we were no longer family because they had borrowed money from me went too far. I'd previously blocked them, so they couldn't contact me, but they knew that if my husband tried to chat with me, I might just listen. So they were attempting to appeal to him, and my husband could remind me that we were a family regardless, so I needed to act like it rather than throwing tantrums over minor misunderstandings and acting like a brat. My parents also stated that they intended to repay the money to me later, but they were unable to do so all at once. They'd already stated it to me 1,000,000 times, so I needed to be more considerate because my brother was suffering at work and my parents were due to retire in a few years. They were attempting to persuade my husband that this was entirely my fault and that I was acting out for no reason. But my husband handled it very effectively, and rather than putting them in their place, he entertained them and made them feel like he was on their side. He told them that while he could try to explain it to me, it would be far more helpful if they came out to me personally and wrote me a meaningful note. So far, they had only been accusatory against me, but my husband persuaded them that if they admitted their mistakes, it would calm me down. And those idiots actually purchased it. My spouse tricked them into sending me a message in which they admitted what they had done, leading them to assume that this would make me easy on them. They assumed I would eventually apologize to them since tone was everything. It's all nonsense, of course, since the moment they send that communication, we treat it as an admission of guilt and pursue them criminally. I am actually very pleased with my husband since he handled this far better than I would have, and I believe he is an evil genius. But he's my evil genius, and I adore him. Update 3. My husband's strategy worked, and we are quite excited right now. My dad and brother, like a bunch of fools, Sent me an email listing every single lie they had lied and admitting to everything they had done. So, now that we have documentation, my husband has granted our lawyer permission to proceed with a petition, and we will soon receive our money back. $125,000 may not seem like much to other people, but it means a lot to me because I've spent the previous 5 years trying to save for the future and worked really hard to get where I am now. It took a lot of late hours and sacrifices, and I'm not going to let it all go to waste just because my brother is lazy and my parents want to help him. So we will sue them, and whatever it takes, we will get my money back. We've already begun arranging our honeymoon, which will be a brief vacation to the beach because that's where it all began and will always be precious to us. We might take a longer break in a couple of months and treat it like a vacation, but for the time being, this will have to suffice. We know we don't need to impress people or spend a lot of money. We can do whatever makes us happy, and we are doing just that. Also, I don't want to be like my brother, who shared images from his honeymoon after they returned just to stick it in people's faces. But now he's going to be sued for just that. It's incredibly awful for them, but they brought it on themselves, so they completely deserve whatever comes their way. I worked hard, but my parents favored my sister. When they asked for money for her, I refused. My grandparents supported me and cut them off. I believed my parents were finally treating me properly since I had shown myself, but it turned out to be nothing more than a demand for their daughter and her 6 children from 3 consecutive marriages. I grew up knowing I was not the favorite child. My parents were always more concerned about my younger sister Emma, who seemed to have endless opportunities and support no matter how many times she made bad decisions. I grew accustomed to standing on my own 2 feet. I worked hard, paid for college with a combination of scholarships and part-time employment, and eventually found a steady, well-paying job. My parents were never impressed, despite the fact that I did everything on my own. For years, I attempted to brush it off and keep going, hoping that one day they'd admire me for being independent. Meanwhile, Emma's life was a roller coaster. She married young, and her first marriage dissolved after 2 years because her husband cheated. She remarried quickly and had 2 more children, but the marriage ended when her second husband developed a gambling addiction and lost their home. Emma was on her 3rd marriage at the time I started my job, and she had 6 children ranging in age from 12 to 2. Her current spouse works part-time as a delivery driver and is attempting to launch his own business, but they are struggling to make ends meet. My folks have always been there to assist her out, paying for items here and there and making excuses for why she needs a little extra support. For a while, I was too preoccupied with my own life to get caught up in Emma's drama, but then I saw a difference in how my parents regarded me. They became more attentive, reaching out more frequently, congratulating me on my profession, and inviting me over for family dinners. I wondered if they were finally proud of me. Part of me had been hoping for this for years, and I suppose I was willing to believe they were turning a corner. Last month, they invited me to supper. At first, everything seemed normal. We talked about work and caught up on tiny family stuff, and for a brief period, I felt like a member of the family in a way that I hadn't previously. But then the topic moved. They started talking about Emma, how difficult it was for her to raise 6 children on one salary, and how my parents had done everything they could to help but were running out of money. They went on to say how fortunate I was to have a decent job and a consistent salary, that I had no one relying on me, and that I was able to contribute back to the family. Then came the shocker. They expected me to step up and take care of Emma financially. They had a comprehensive plan. First, they asked me to buy her a new 5-bedroom house because her present rental was too small for a family of 8. They wanted me to set up college funds for all 6 of her children, which they argued was only fair given that I was the only one who could afford it. They wanted me to offer her a $5,000 monthly stipend to cover basic expenses as well as seed money to start her own mommy blog business. They planned to receive approximately $2 million up front, followed by continued funding. I sat there, absolutely stunned. They weren't asking for a minor favor. This was a lifelong commitment that regarded me as Emma's financial safety net. In that moment, I recognized that their recent compassion was not because they had finally accepted me as their son, but because they regarded me as a walking ATM for Emma. I informed them that, while I was willing to assist with minor bills or in the event of an emergency, I was not comfortable taking on such a large financial burden. At that point, the family conversation shifted completely. My mother began to cry, accusing me of abandoning the family when they needed me the most, and my father labeled me selfish and ungrateful. They stated I was revealing my true colors and that they were disappointed with who I had become. The dinner finished with them storming out. I believed that would be the end of it, but I was mistaken. Within hours, Emma began assaulting my phone with texts accusing me of jeopardizing her children's future. She even had her children send me messages like, "Uncle doesn't love us anymore." It was unbearable, so I blocked their phone numbers. After a while, I couldn't believe the situation had gotten this bad, all because I refused to fund my sister's life. The next day, my grandmother, my father's mother, called me unexpectedly. Apparently, my parents had been assuring the entire extended family that their successful son would take care of everything for Emma before they even asked me. They constructed an image for everyone of Emma moving into a big new house, of all her financial troubles being resolved, and of me being the one to provide her with everything she needed. Now that I'd declined, they were facing a big wave of embarrassment because the family had expected me to come through based on my parents' premature bragging. My grandparents were appalled when they learned the complete story. They'd always assumed Emma's lifestyle was sponsored by her different spouses, and that my parents helped out because they wanted to, rather than because they'd gone into debt to support her. They were so upset by my parents' behavior that they are now threatening to remove them from their will. They informed me that they would rather leave their estate to me and my relatives, who work hard and do not take advantage of people. As the situation spread around the family, I began to get messages from relatives offering their support. Some of them admitted they had no idea how much I had been dealing with on my own and apologized for not noticing it sooner. My aunt, my mother's sister, even contacted me and apologized for not realizing how differently I was treated growing up. The family dynamics were beginning to unravel, with everyone taking sides, and my parents were not handling it well. My phone started ringing nonstop again, this time with my parents exchanging angry, nasty messages and weeping voicemails. They were upset that I was damaging their family's reputation. They once left a message telling me that I was ruining Emma's children's life and that I would come to regret this decision someday. They'd then go back to imploring me to reconsider, saying things like, "We're family, and family helps each other." All of this has made me feel like a disaster. Part of me feels bad because I was trained to believe that family comes first, and it's difficult to break free of that conditioning. But another part of me is fatigued, thinking how long I've been trying to gain approval from people who just care about what benefits them. The knowledge stings, but I know that giving in now would result in years of financial and mental exhaustion, putting Emma's demands before of my own. Now I'm here on Reddit because I honestly don't know what to do next. Do I hold firm and maintain my limits because I know it's the best thing for me, or is there a compromise I'm not seeing? I could appreciate some unbiased counsel on this problem. Update 1. The situation with my parents and sister has deteriorated beyond my expectations. Just a few days after I told my grandparents the complete tale, they weren't lying about revising their will. They actually followed through, contacting their lawyer very immediately to ensure that my parents were removed from their inheritance. My grandparents had always been the quiet, keep the peace kind, so this wasn't just surprising, it was unprecedented in our family. However, it appears that my parents' years of favoritism toward Emma were the final straw. My grandparents also went above and beyond, convening a family meeting to clear the air. They planned it over the phone so that everyone, including myself, could attend, despite the fact that I live further away. They wanted everyone to grasp exactly what was going on, and based on what they implied, I had a hunch they were going to disclose stuff I had no idea about. The meeting was attended by a few aunts, uncles and cousins, basically, anyone close enough to be affected by this. When the conference began, my grandparents wasted no time. They instantly revealed that they had been paying large sums of money to my parents for the previous many years to aid both me and Emma with our education and future aspirations. They had given my parents more than $200,000 in all, with the expectation that it would be split evenly between Emma and me. I was speechless. I'd pushed my way through college on scholarships, student loans, and various part-time jobs, fighting to manage work and classes, whereas Emma seemed to live on another planet, scarcely lifting a finger and continually being bailed out of every bad decision. All those years, I'd been doing everything on my own while my grandparents sent money that I never received. My grandparents were infuriated. They had expected the money would benefit both of us, but now that they see how my parents had spent it, they feel absolutely deceived. They'd made it clear to my parents that they wished to support both of us, but it turned out that the money had primarily gone to Emma, covering her failed marriages, rent payments, and who knows what else. They requested that my parents provide a thorough accounting of how every dollar had been spent, threatening to bring attorneys if they did not comply. For a family as secretive as ours, this was an unimaginable step, but I could see they'd been tested. In addition, my grandparents indicated that they would establish trust funds for each of their grandkids, including Emma's 6 children. However, they made it clear that the money would be carefully handled by an independent trustee and could only be used for certain purposes, such as education or healthcare. They made it clear that they did not want my parents or Emma to have access to these funds, which was a big relief. At the very least, I knew Emma's children would have a chance at a solid future without my parents depleting those accounts for other purposes. Everything exploded following the family meeting. As they began to put the pieces together, relatives began to contact me one by one. Apparently, this wasn't the first time my parents had taken money from family members in the name of assisting the kids or funding family emergencies. An aunt told me that after Emma's second marriage failed, she loaned my parents a few $1,000s, believing it was for emergency expenses. Another cousin recalls my parents asking for money around the time I went to college, claiming it was to assist me get started, but I never saw any of it. Some of them were furious, believing they had been misled about where their money had gone. Others were simply unhappy, stating they had not known how much my parents valued Emma over me. One of my cousins even showed me screenshots of discussions with my parents after I graduated from college. They had actually discouraged family from attending my graduation, stating that I wanted to keep it small and avoid a major fuss. Meanwhile, I was hoping that my family would come and celebrate with me. It felt like a gut punch to realize how much they'd consciously sought to downplay my accomplishments while continually going all in for Emma. What astonished me the most was Emma herself reaching out to me. She sent a couple long emails, each with a unique tone. In one, she tried to seem as if she had always backed me, saying how she had never known our parents' bias toward her and how she had always assumed we were close. In another, she portrayed herself as a victim of our parents' manipulation, claiming that they had blinded her to the truth about our family dynamics. But what jumped out in each communication was that she always managed to include a request for assistance during this tough period. She tried to behave as if we were now best friends, but it was evident she still wanted me to open my wallet for her. It was difficult to believe. Even after my grandparents took such severe measures to put things right, and despite the family outrage, Emma still managed to make it all about her and what she could get from me. I felt like I was seeing the same narrative over and over. She couldn't seem to grasp the concept of limits or the fact that I was tired of being a constant source of comfort. I was determined not to allow her to manipulate me back into that role. While everything was going on, my folks were busy with their own campaign. They inundated me with voicemails that ranged from violent rants to emotional appeals. In one message, my mother accused me of pulling the family apart, claiming I would regret it one day when I discovered how much I had harmed everyone. My father would then ask me to reconsider, saying we could work things out quietly and it didn't have to be such a huge deal. They even tried to guilt-trip me, telling me that I was placing my grandparents in an unpleasant situation and that I should consider how they would feel if the family divided as a result of all this. But their tactics were ineffective. My grandparents were behind me, and the rest of the family could see my parents' true colors. Some of them even contacted out to say they were proud of me for staying firm. My aunt contacted me in tears, apologizing for not noticing how differently my parents had treated me throughout the years. She said she'd always imagined I was more self-sufficient and didn't require as much assistance, but now she realized I'd been forced into that role because my parents had focused so much on Emma. As the family began to understand what I had been going through, more people came out with apologies or anecdotes about things they had noticed over the years. It was bittersweet. Part of me was relieved that the truth was finally being revealed, that others were acknowledging the sacrifices I had made on my own, but another part of me felt as if I was reliving years of pain and disappointment. All those times I felt invisible, all those times I questioned why my accomplishments didn't seem to matter so much, it all made sense suddenly. However, it did not erase the years of feeling like I was second best. The aftermath of this has been draining. My parents continue to refuse to accept responsibility for any of it. They're so concerned with the family's reputation that they can't see the damage they've done to it. This is just another disagreement that I should drop for the sake of peace, and they are trying to keep the entire thing under wraps. But I no longer feel bad for standing up for myself. I guess I'm finally seeing how crucial it is to create limits, especially with family. If I give in now, it will only mean more years of being used and taken for granted. For the first time, I feel in control of my own life. My grandparents have informed me that if my parents take this any further, they would deal with it. They've made it clear that they don't want me to feel pressured, and they've even informed me that if my parents continue to stir things up, they'll take further precautions to safeguard me. Just knowing I don't have to go through this alone has made a huge impact. Now I'm left wondering what family means at this point. All these years, I believed that being a good son and brother entailed putting everyone else first, sacrificing my own needs to ensure that everyone else was okay. But now I understand that there is a limit, and family isn't supposed to treat you like an ATM or overlook your own happiness simply because it's convenient. As things continue to unfold, I remain steadfast in my decision, but a part of me wonders if I should be doing more or approaching this differently. I'd greatly appreciate any suggestions on how to proceed. There is still so much to comprehend, and I'm trying to take it one day at a time. Update 2. My parents broke their quiet just a few days after my grandparents made their major news about the will. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging they may have gone too far, they sent a lengthy, meticulously crafted email attempting to justify every decision they had ever taken. They didn't just defend Emma, they virtually praised it, describing it as an investment because Emma had always been more family-oriented. Meanwhile, I was classified as self-sufficient and career-oriented, which they assumed indicated I didn't require as much assistance. They went on to clarify that their call for me to step in and fund Emma's life had nothing to do with money. They regarded it as even things out, giving Emma the same advantages they believed I had on my own. To add salt to the wound, they called me selfish for refusing to share my surplus wealth with my family. The email wasn't just words either. They sent a list of everything they claimed to have spent on me versus Emma. I'm talking about everything, including Emma's basic needs such as food, clothing, and housing. They mentioned her wedding expenses, property payments, and even post-divorce therapy. They even mentioned Emma's emotional assistance during her adolescent years, valuing and quantifying it. It was so ridiculous that I recognized they'd been thinking about it for a long time, most likely intending to hurl it back at me. They apparently shared this email with the entire extended family as well, aiming to present me as the selfish one. But it completely backfired. Relatives who had previously remained neutral began contacting me, appalled by what they viewed as an outlandish attempt to tax me for fundamental parenting. Some even apologized for not comprehending the kind of partiality I was dealing with. I believe my parents expected people to gather around them, but all they did was push everyone further away. In addition to this, my grandparents' lawyer became involved. My grandparents had always expected that any money they had given my parents over the years would be divided between me and Emma for our education and other essential costs. They soon discovered that the money had been spent on Emma's marriages and unsuccessful relationships. The lawyer wrote an official letter to my parents asking a thorough accounting of where the money had gone. My grandparents were prepared to take this to court if necessary, and I don't blame them. They felt betrayed, and so did I. It was like a tangled web of deception that had been growing for years, with me on the sidelines the entire time. In a strange twist, Emma's first ex-husband contacted me. He is the father of her 2 oldest children, and while we had never been close, we had remained civil. He told me that he had heard about everything and wanted to express his perspective. He confessed that when Emma became pregnant, my parents coerced him into marrying her, promising financial support as long as he followed through with the marriage. I knew they married quickly, but I had no idea my parents were that involved. Apparently, the majority of the support my parents had provided came from money they had received from my grandparents, money my grandparents had assumed was going toward Emma's and my futures. Emma's ex even apologized, claiming he regretted not standing up to them and allowing the situation to get out of control. My parents quickly noticed the email wasn't having the desired effect, so they tried to backtrack. They wrote a follow-up reply to everyone, explaining that the previous email was sent in rage and should not be taken seriously. But it was difficult to believe that reason given that their email had clearly been planned for some time. They could have printed and dispatched it as an official document, given how detailed it was. Trying to take it back now simply made them appear worse, and no one bought it. Emma had been silent for a few days following the family meeting, but she began reaching out again. Her tone had changed from guilt-tripping to more urgent. She sent a few emails, implying that she had always loved me and had no idea our parents treated us so differently. She even tried to justify her condition, stating she didn't want to burden me but was in a terrible situation with her children. Her texts became stranger, swinging between sentimental memories from childhood and reminders of how difficult life was for her with 6 children and a suffering husband. At one point, she mentioned her husband's economic difficulties and implied that her children were struggling in school due to the stress at home. It was difficult not to feel awful for Emma and her children, but I also couldn't ignore what had happened. She had known about our parents' fondness for years and took advantage of it, leaving me to fend for myself. She wanted me to come in and help her now that she was struggling. Her communications made me feel sad rather than outraged. She was my sister, and her children were completely innocent in all of this, but it was not my obligation to save her from a predicament she had helped create. More family members began sharing their stories. One of my aunts contacted me, apologizing for never saying anything when she observed things weren't fair between Emma and me. She remembered times when my parents plainly preferred Emma and ignored me, but she didn't want to get involved at the time. She also revealed that she had volunteered to help me with my college applications, but my parents declined, claiming that I had everything under control. In actuality, I was managing everything on my own, including school applications and work. My aunt admitted that she had no idea how much I had been left to manage on my own, and she felt bad for not intervening sooner. Family group chats reached a whole new level of awkwardness. Relatives began reaching out, asking if I needed anything or if they could help in any way. It was unusual to suddenly have so many people offering help and sympathy, especially because they'd never been so active in my life before. I loved their goodwill, but it became overpowering. Part of me felt like I shouldn't need their help right now. I'd already gone through the most difficult sections on my own. I mostly thanked them, wondering what else to say. Even my parents' closest friends started to distance themselves. A few people accepted their version of the story, that I was a workaholic who did not prioritize family. But after reading the email and hearing additional information, they began to see through my parents' explanations. Some even apologized, admitting they were wrong to judge me. One of them even indicated that my parents had borrowed money from them, citing family needs. They had assumed it was for necessary costs, but now they were wondering if they had been subsidizing Emma's lifestyle. Despite everything, my parents continued to push. They kept sending messages, arguing that I owed them for everything they'd done for me, that I was responsible for keeping the family together, and that my failure to support Emma was causing the family to fall apart. They claimed I was wrecking everything, damaging their reputation, and endangering Emma's children. It was frustrating because they were ignoring their own acts and pretended that none of this was their fault. For the time being, I'm not backing down. I refuse to be guilted into correcting problems that my parents caused, or to accept responsibility for Emma's decisions. It's still difficult to believe this is my family, that things have gotten to the point where I have to choose between my own well-being and what they call family loyalty. It's a lot to process, and I honestly don't know what the future holds, but for the first time, I feel like I'm standing up for myself and finally being heard. That is, at the very least, a positive step forward. Update 3. The situation has reached an unexpected conclusion. After all of the chaos and hidden issues that had surfaced, my grandparents decided to take a tough stance. They scheduled a final family gathering, this time with their lawyer present. It felt as if a chapter was coming to an end, but there were still so many wounds and unresolved feelings in the air. However, this wasn't simply talk. My grandparents had a plan, and they were not going to waste any more time. They claimed that they had not only revised their will, but were also taking quick action with their assets to avoid further abuse. For years, my parents had been living rent-free in a family-owned holiday home. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, but my parents made it their permanent home, expecting it to be passed down to them. But that's over. My grandparents are selling the land and intend to use the funds to establish educational trusts for all of their great-grandchildren. This includes Emma's and my cousin's children. My grandparents also implemented a reorganization strategy to ensure that no more funds were diverted accidentally. They are establishing annual educational grants for any family members pursuing higher education or professional credentials. However, these monies will be administered by an impartial trustee, with no family members participating. My folks were noticeably shaken upon hearing this. Losing the free lodging was terrible enough, but the realization that they would no longer have access to my grandparents' land was a rude awakening. For once, they didn't argue, or at least realized it wouldn't help. They simply looked defeated, which was unusual for my parents given their years of pride and control. My grandparents gave them 60 days to leave the land, with no extensions. The lawyer handed them a signed document, and my parents had no choice but to comply. In a stunning turn of events, my parents admitted to certain financial errors concerning school monies supplied by my grandparents years ago. This was a tremendous revelation, and many family members were shocked. With few options left, my parents signed a formal repayment agreement. Even though I'm sure it would be difficult for them, after they leave the property, they will have to move into a small apartment and severely reduce their lifestyle. It's evident that this is a significant adjustment for them. They've lived well on family assistance for so long that I doubt they ever expected to have to budget or downsize. Meanwhile, Emma appears to have accepted the reality of the situation. Her support system is basically collapsing around her. My parents' free support is no longer available, and she can no longer rely on them to pay her expenses or bail her out if her husband's business initiatives fail. Instead of moaning or trying to guilt-trip me, she is now taking efforts to improve her own situation. She's enrolled in a vocational program for medical billing and coding, which should provide her with a consistent income and the opportunity to raise her children on her own terms. Her spouse has taken on more hours at his delivery job and appears to be making an attempt to contribute to the family's costs. Emma even sent me an email, not asking for money, but simply requesting assistance with her resume. I decided to check into it, assuming it was a little way to help without encouraging her dependence. Hearing from Emma's children has been one of the most shocking and pleasant developments. They contacted me through Emma's father, her first ex-husband. Apparently, my grandparents had planned for them to attend family therapy sessions. They'd been dealing with a lot of confusion about family dynamics and had been caught up in so much drama. Now, with the help of a therapist, they're starting to comprehend the intricate relationships and favoritism they've grown up in. The elder kids apologized for the guilt-tripping messages they had delivered when everything initially began. They said they didn't realize how much pressure their mother was placing on me, and they felt horrible about being used as pawns. I promised them everything was okay and that none of this was their fault. They were just kids, after all, and they were simply following their mother's instructions. I'm confident that treatment will help kids learn that they are not responsible for resolving the conflict amongst the adults in their lives. My parents appear to be adjusting to their new situation, but they are having difficulty totally accepting it. In one final attempt to rewrite the narrative, they began sending me random photos from my childhood, each with captions like, "Remember when we were a happy family," and "Don't forget who's been there since the beginning." I'm not sure if they're genuinely trying to make amends or if it's just another ploy to play on my emotions. Some texts describe how much they suffered to raise me, while others depict them as victims abandoned by everyone they cared about. They've also been telling anyone who will listen that the family has turned against them, presenting the situation as if they were innocent victims simply trying to help Emma. But I believe most of the family has seen through it by now. They maintain their distance, and their interactions are now courteous but distant. As for me, the entire experience has been eye-opening. I had no idea how far the favoritism extended or how much my family had been exploited over the years. My grandparents have been great throughout this process, demonstrating strength and justice that I had never appreciated before. They're taking on the role of champions for the future generation, ensuring that nothing like what happened to me and Emma happens again. The entire process has been a challenging but essential reality check. It has revealed me who actually cares about me and who only sees me as a source of financial assistance. Finally, I want to thank everyone who has supported me. Thank you and farewell. My boyfriend and I just had a baby when his ex-mother-in-law suddenly claimed the child was her grandchild, causing chaos at the hospital. Okay, Reddit, I really need some advice. I'm 29 years old, and my 30-year-old partner Mark and I just welcomed our daughter Lily 2 weeks ago. Lily is incredible, healthy, and the utter joy of our lives. Getting here, however, has been a daytime soap opera-worthy drama, and it all boils down to two really tough mothers, my ex-mother-in-law and Mark's mother. To comprehend the current situation, I need to give you some background. I was previously married, however briefly. I met my ex-husband David, 31 million, when I was 22. We were young, impetuous, and believed we were madly in love. We got married after roughly 8 months of dating. It was a fiasco nearly from the beginning. We were simply fundamentally incompatible. We disagreed about everything, from how to load the dishwasher, really, to our long-term objectives. He wanted to stay in our small hometown forever, purchase a house with a white picket fence, and start having children right away. In my late 20s, I wanted to focus on my job and perhaps consider having children. We had been married for a little more than a year before we recognized it was a mistake. There was no dramatic outburst, no infidelity, just a quiet, agonizing awareness that we were making each other unhappy. We chose to divorce. It was unexpectedly amicable. We didn't detest each other, we simply realized we were better off apart. We did not have any shared assets or children, so the legal process was relatively simple. My parents were supportive. They were never major fans of David. They felt he was dull, to be honest, and all they wanted was for me to be happy. But David's mother was quite different. Let us call her Susan. She is the type of lady who has her entire life planned out, and she wants everyone around her to follow suit, whether they want it or not. She is also profoundly devout, believing that divorce is a sin regardless of the circumstances. Susan had an image of David and me as the ideal conventional couple. She was distraught when we broke up. She tried everything to convince us to work things out, including guilt trips, tearful phone calls, and even an unannounced visit to my apartment with a marriage counselor. It was quite awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be courteous and considerate, but I needed to be firm. I told her that while I appreciated her concern, the choice was final. The divorce was settled approximately 7 years ago. I relocated to a different city, found a terrific job, and began a completely new life. I severed off touch with David and Susan. It was not out of malice, it was simply essential for me to move on. We were not social media pals, and we had no shared friends, so it was a clean break. Then, around a year and a half ago, I met Mark. We met during a work conference. We started conversing during a coffee break and instantly clicked. He was humorous, smart, and kind, and we shared a love of travel and adventure. We exchanged numbers and began dating shortly after. Mark knew about my prior marriage from the start. It was not a secret. I told him the whole tale on our second date, and he was unconcerned. He claimed it was in the past, and it didn't change his feelings about me. He'd been in a couple long-term relationships before, so he knew that not everything works out. We fell in love instantly. It was different from my relationship with David. Mark made it feel effortless, natural, and exciting. We had a lot in common and really loved each other's company. Around 6 months into our relationship, I met Mark's parents. His father, John, is the loveliest, most laid-back person you will ever meet. He greeted me warmly and made me feel right at home. Mark's mother, Carol, had a different narrative. Carol is complex. She is highly polished, very proper, and very opinionated. She's also quite attached to Mark, her only child. From the time I met her, I could tell she was assessing me and finding flaws in me. She was cordial, but there was a noticeable coolness in the air. She made a few subtle digs at my divorce, nothing overtly nasty, but things like, "Oh, you've been married before? That's interesting." Or, "I always believed that marriage is forever, no matter what." She also stated that she anticipated Mark to settle down and have a typical family, just as Susan had wished for David. I attempted to brush it off. I assumed she was simply protective of her son, and I hoped she'd warm up to me gradually. But she never actually did. She was always nice, but never truly friendly. She'd ask me questions about my profession and my family, but it felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Then, around 8 months ago, I discovered I was pregnant. It was a nice surprise. Mark and I had talked about having kids in the future, but we weren't actively trying. We were both excited though. We chose not to marry immediately away. I'd already been through one hasty wedding and didn't want to go through it again. I wanted to be sure that we were getting married for the right reasons, not just because we were expecting a child. Mark fully understood and supported my decision. We informed our family. My parents were overjoyed. They had always wanted grandchildren. John was equally excited. He began talking about building a treehouse and teaching the infant to fish. Carol, as one could expect, was unhappy. She didn't say anything directly unpleasant, but her displeasure was obvious. She continued saying things like, "Well, I suppose it's not the traditional way to do things." And, "I just hope you're both prepared for the challenges of parenthood." She also began implying strongly that we should marry before the kid arrived. The pregnancy itself went relatively smoothly. I had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but overall I felt fine. Mark was quite supportive. He attended all of my doctor's appointments, read all of the baby books, and even began learning to cook, which was a little miracle. Throughout the pregnancy, Carol was a source of stress. She'd contact me on a regular basis, purportedly to check in, but the calls were always more like lectures. She would advise me what I should eat, how much I should exercise, and which parenting books I should read. She even sent me a list of recommended baby names, all of which were quite outdated and stuffy. I tried to be patient and understanding. I understood she was simply trying to help in her own way, but it was exhausting. I felt as though I was constantly being scrutinized and chastised. Then, approximately a month before my due date, something totally unexpected occurred. I received a text message from an unfamiliar phone number. The message went, "Is this OP? It's Susan, David's mom. We need to talk. It's about the baby." My heart sank. I hadn't communicated with Susan in years. Why is she approaching me now? And what did she mean by "it's about the baby"? I showed Mark the text. He was just as perplexed as I was. We decided that I should contact her back and see what was going on. I called Susan, and she instantly answered. She sounded frantic. She responded, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think the baby you're carrying is David's." I was speechless. I honestly could not understand what she was saying. "What? Susan, that's impossible. I haven't seen David in years." She mentioned that she saw a photo of me on social media. Apparently, one of my distant relatives had tagged me in a photo, and I was obviously pregnant. She'd done some research, which I'm pretty sure included researching my online profiles, and determined that the timing was suitable. She was sure that I had secretly reconciled with David and that this baby was his. I tried to politely convey to her that she was entirely wrong. I informed her about Mark and how long we had been together, but she would not listen. She insisted that I was lying and that I should come clean for the sake of the baby. The chat concluded with her threatening to show up at the hospital if I went into labor. I hung up the phone, thoroughly shaken and confused. I told Mark everything. He was infuriated. He couldn't believe Susan had accused me of something so absurd. He wanted to call her and tell her what was on his mind, but I urged him not to. I did not want to exacerbate the matter. We decided to ignore Susan and hope she'd come to her senses. We assumed she was simply grabbing at straws, eager for her son to have a child. Then, 2 weeks ago, I went into labor. After a long and arduous labor, our beautiful daughter Lily was born. Mark was with me the whole time, and he was incredible. We were in the recovery room, fatigued but elated, when there was a ruckus outside the door. Susan burst into the room, followed by a confused-looking security guard. She began to scream, "That's my grandchild. I know it. You need to tell the truth. You've been lying to everyone." It was a total nightmare. I was still in recovery from childbirth. I was hormonal, and I felt completely humiliated. Mark intervened and told Susan to go, but she refused. It required 2 security personnel to forcibly remove her from the room. The entire situation was quite disturbing. I was furious with Susan. When we returned home from the hospital, I decided to phone David. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I felt compelled to clear the air and ensure he understood what his mother had done. He answered the phone, clearly astonished to hear from me. I explained the scenario, and he was shocked. He apologized profusely for his mother's actions. He said that he had been dating a new woman, Serene. Serene and I have a similar first name, but not precisely the same. Imagine my name is Serena, and hers is Serene. Similar, but not the same. David had been keeping Serene a secret from his mother. Susan was fascinated with him remarrying and having children, and he didn't want to deal with her expectations. Susan had apparently overheard David's phone conversation with Serene around a month ago. She misheard the name and assumed he uttered my name. She assumed right away that David and I had reconciled. David, being a bit of a coward, his words, not mine, had not corrected her. He reasoned that it was better to let her think whatever she wanted than to cope with her reaction to his new connection. He explained that I intended to keep things quiet, which is why she had not heard from me. Susan's sister was also in the hospital for a routine appointment on the day I went into labor. She'd only met me a few times years ago, but she was aware of Susan's preoccupation with me and David. When she saw me, very pregnant, being brought to labor and delivery, she immediately contacted Susan. Susan ended up at my hospital room, thinking that I was carrying her grandson. David apologized profusely. He claimed he was an idiot who should have told his mother the truth a long time ago. He also told me that he tried to speak with his mother, but she refused to believe him. She was convinced he was only covering for me. He stated he and Susan were moving to another state to be closer to Serene, so I wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. I told him I appreciated his apology, but what he and his mother had done was extremely devastating. I told him I didn't want to speak with him or Susan again. Mark was listening to the entire exchange. He was infuriated. He claimed he couldn't believe David and Susan had been so selfish and irresponsible. It established that I wasn't crazy, but it didn't address the larger issue, Carol. Mark informed his parents about the incident in the hospital. Of course, John was outraged. He could not believe Susan would do something so outrageous. Carol, on the other hand, remained unusually quiet. She did not defend Susan, and she did not criticize her either. She simply stated, "Well, it's certainly a complicated situation." A few days later, Carol came to see us. She brought a gift for Lily, a really costly baby blanket that was completely not my style. She held Lily for a few minutes, fawning over her, and then got down to business. She went on. "Mark, I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation, and I think for everyone's peace of mind, it would be best if you got a paternity test." I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was making that suggestion. Mark glanced at me, his eyes filled with a mix of rage and remorse. He responded, "Mom, I'm not doing that. I trust OP completely. This is ridiculous." Carol did not back down. She responded, "It's not about trust, Mark. It's about being responsible. You need to know for sure. What if Susan is right? What if this baby is David's?" I eventually spoke up. I corrected myself. "Carol, I can assure you this baby is Mark's. I haven't been with anyone else since we met. This is insulting." She fixed me with a harsh, hard stare. "I'm just trying to protect my son," she explained. "I'm sure you understand." The conversation deteriorated from there. It ended with Mark telling his mother that he would not even contemplate a paternity test and that if she couldn't trust him and respect his relationship with me, she wasn't welcome in our family. She stormed out, and we haven't heard from her again. Mark tried calling her several times, but she would not answer. John has phoned Mark, and he is really furious about the situation. He's caught in the center and doesn't know what to do. So, Reddit, here I am. I'm a new mom navigating the responsibilities of parenting while simultaneously dealing with this terrible family drama. I'm upset and angry that Carol would question my honesty and Mark's paternity. I'm also concerned about the long-term influence on Mark's connection with his mother. I informed Carol that if she wanted to continue pressing the DNA test issue, she could kick rocks. I didn't say those exact words, I was more polite, but the message was clear. I told her that if she couldn't accept Lily as Mark's daughter without proof, she didn't have to be a member of our family. AITA? I want Mark to have a relationship with his mother, but I also refuse to be treated so disrespectfully. And I certainly do not want my daughter to grow up with someone who doubts her parentage. Any tips or recommendations will be considered. Update 1. Wow. I did not anticipate this post to get that viral. Thank you to everyone for their encouragement and wisdom. It's been quite reassuring to learn that I'm not crazy, and that Carol's behavior is utterly out of character. Many of you suggested that I talk to Mark about having clear boundaries with his mother, and you are completely correct. I had been postponing the talk because I was fatigued and did not want to deal with any more turmoil, but it had to happen. So, last night, after Lily was sleeping, Mark and I had a long conversation. Carol's demand for a paternity test wounded and disrespected me, and I told him so. I also expressed concern about the damage this was having on his relationship with his father John. Mark absolutely understood. He stated that he was furious with his mother, not only for the paternity test request, but also for her behavior throughout my pregnancy. He explained that he had been making excuses for her for years, but he was finally seeing her for who she truly is, a controlling, manipulative woman who is more concerned with her personal image than her son's pleasure. He told me he tried contacting her again, but she still did not answer. He left her a voicemail in which he expressed his disappointment with her and stated that he would not contact her again unless she apologized to me and accepted Lily as his daughter, no questions asked. He also mentioned he had spoken with John again. John is heartbroken by the circumstances. He adores Carol, but he also understands that she is in the wrong. He told Mark that he was thinking of staying with us for a while to get away from Carol and spend more time with Lily. Mark and I agreed to welcome John with open arms. We have an extra bedroom and Lily adores him. It would be wonderful to have his assistance, and it would also provide him with a reprieve from his toxic home situation. Some of you questioned my parents and why they weren't more involved. That's a valid question, and I should have addressed it in the original piece. My folks live fairly far away, on the opposite side of the country, actually. They are likewise in their late 50s and not in good health. Traveling vast distances is quite difficult for them, especially given the current constraints and worries. We communicate to them on video calls virtually every day, and they adore Lily even from a distance. They are really supportive of me and Mark, and they were outraged when I told them about Susan's outburst in the hospital and Carol's subsequent behavior. They wish they could aid, but they are physically unable to do so. They send their love and support, which means everything to me. They also stated that if John needed a place to crash, they would gladly contribute some money and urged me to find him a suitable retirement home. It was quite sweet of them. So that's where things are right now. Carol is still giving us the quiet treatment. John is considering moving in with us. Mark and I are attempting to concentrate on being parents to our wonderful little girl. I'm no longer attempting to placate Carol or avoid her sentiments. I'm prioritizing my family, which is what matters most. I will keep you informed of any additional developments. Thank you for your continued support. Update 2. Things have intensified. John arrived to stay with us a few days ago. He arrived with a small luggage and a very sorrowful attitude. He explained that Carol had rarely spoken to him since Mark's last phone contact. She was cold and distant, and he couldn't take it anymore. He spent the first day largely snuggling Lily and talking with Mark. He seemed relieved to be free of the stress and negativity. He kept emphasizing how much he loved Lily and was happy for the opportunity to spend time with her. Carol then showed up uninvited at our door yesterday. I was in the nursery, feeding Lily, when the doorbell rang. Mark responded, and I could hear Carol's voice, loud and strident. When I entered the living room, I noticed a tight atmosphere. Carol stood in the doorway, enraged. John sat on the couch, looking defeated. Mark was standing between them with his arms crossed. Carol requested that John return home immediately. She complained that he was being foolish and was humiliating her. She accused me of manipulating him and using him against her. John attempted to speak, but Carol stifled him. She just kept shouting and raving, accusing me of various things. Mark finally had enough. He informed Carol unequivocally that she needed to leave. He stated that she was not welcome in our home unless she apologized to me and embraced Lily without reservation. Carol appeared shocked. She obviously wasn't used to Mark standing up to her. She stuttered for a while before turning on her heels and storming out, slamming the door behind her. The whole situation was quite stressful. I felt terrible for John. He seemed lost and confused. He continually apologized to me, even though he had done nothing wrong. Mark and I reassured him that he could stay with us as long as he needed. We told him we loved him and were glad we had him. After John had gone to bed, Mark and I talked. We both agreed that Carol's actions were totally wrong. We determined that we needed to establish even stricter boundaries. Mark texted Carol that we would be in no communication until she sought professional help for her controlling conduct and apologized to both me and John. He said that we loved her, but we couldn't let her continue to insult us and ruin our lives. It's been a few days since we've heard from her. I am not sure what to expect. Update 3. It had been roughly a week since Carol's dramatic visit. We haven't heard anything from her, no calls, texts, angry emails, nothing. John, on the other hand, has settled in well. He's a big help to Lily, and he obviously enjoys spending time with her. He reads to her, sings to her, and takes her on walks in the stroller. It is heartwarming to watch. He's also become more candid about his marriage. He told Mark and me that he has been unhappy for years. He claimed that Carol has always been controlling, but it has gotten worse over time. He feels that he's lost himself in the relationship and has been going through the motions. He began attending a therapist, which Mark and I encouraged. He believes it's helping him process his emotions and figure out what he wants for the future. He isn't sure if he wants to stay married to Carol, even if she apologizes. He claims he needs to think about what is best for him for once. Mark totally supports his father, whatever he decides. He's just thrilled John's finally sticking up for himself. As for me, I'm attempting to concentrate on Lily and on building a quiet, loving environment for our family. I'm still upset and outraged over Carol's actions, but I'm trying not to let them consume me. I've started thinking about returning to work part-time. My maternity leave is nearly over, and I miss using my abilities. Mark is entirely on board, and John has offered to assist with childcare. We are also starting to arrange Lily's first birthday party. The party will be modest and exclusive, with only close relatives and friends. Obviously, Carol will not be invited. It's strange to consider celebrating a huge milestone without Mark's mother present, but I just don't see any other option. She made her decision, and she must deal with the consequences. I'm still hopeful that one day she'll see reason and apologize, but I'm not holding my breath. Update 4. A few tiny but major events have occurred. First, John applied for legal separation from Carol. He spoke with a lawyer and determined that it was the best course of action, at least for now. He explained that he needed to create some formal gap between them. He informed Carol of his decision, and she did not take it well. She called Mark, yelling and crying, accusing him of turning his father against her. Mark stayed calm, telling her that John had made his own decision and she should respect it. After a few days, we received a letter from Carol's lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter, requesting that we stop disseminating false and defamatory material about her. Apparently, she claims that we have been telling others that she is mentally ill and a lousy grandma. It's utterly ludicrous, of course. We haven't discussed her with anyone other than John's therapist, which is strictly secret. We're fairly certain she's just attempting to bully and scare us into backing down. Mark consulted his own lawyer, who urged us to disregard the letter. He claimed it was unfounded and Carol had no legal basis to stand on. So, that is where we are. John is legally separated from Carol, and we are facing a ridiculous legal threat. It's all quite stressful, but we're trying to remain strong and unified. On a more positive note, Lily is flourishing. She's growing and maturing so quickly. She began babbling and smiling continuously. She is the most lovely little child, and she brings so much happiness into our life.